Chapter 298. It took less than half a second for the elevator to reach the top floor. A black shadow passed through the luxurious corridors of the club and the lively ballroom. The spiral wooden staircase led straight to the third floor. Kale's face was cold. He stopped in front of the door of the first room. He didn't even look at the door number before he turned his hand from knocking to pushing. Kale didn't control his strength well. As soon as his hand landed on the door, the engraved door caved in. The force of his push sent an invisible shockwave in all directions. Boom! Accompanied by a deafening sound, the metal lock on the door was bent, and the parts of the door that were connected to the wall burst and fell off. The entire door was lifted open and flew into the room. In the luxuriously decorated room, expensive clothes such as men's suits and women's dresses were torn apart. Earthquake? What happened? On a big red bed, a man and a woman who were doing piston exercises naked were startled. By the time they reacted, Kyle had already arrived at the bedside. His eyes were extremely cold as he indifferently scanned the space in the room. The woman was stunned. She looked down at her body and screamed. Then she buried her head under the blanket. The man looked at Kale in panic. His lower body was limp. He was angry, but he didn't dare say anything. "Sir, is there anything I can help you with?" Kyle didn't respond. His divine power flowed and his field of influence formed a pressure that spread out like a wave. The man and woman on the bed didn't even last a second before they fainted. "Master. You're in the wrong room. This is not room 301. It's next door." Vice's voice reminded him. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Kale turned around. He didn't leave through the door. Instead, he kicked the wall of the room with his left foot. Amidst the rumbling of the explosion, the wall seemed to have been destroyed by a bomb, revealing a large gap that allowed a person to pass through. The room was instantly connected to room 301 next door. Dust and debris filled the air. A small figure was sitting on a chair in the lobby of room 301. He looked at Kyle and muttered to himself with an inexplicable emotion. As expected. Just like what she said, you're a straightforward and impatient person. You haven't changed even after so many years. Who are you? Why do you have Paige's card? Why did you bring me here? Kale's voice was cold. Looking at the mysterious man, he threw out the question without stopping. He didn't walk forward again, keeping a distance of 5 meters. He knew that it was impossible to get close to an ability user who was proficient in the profound meaning of space. Until now, you still haven't thought of the answer? Or are you saying that you have thought of it, but you are still unwilling to admit the mistake you made? The mysterious man's tone was extremely unpleasant, and it was hard to tell whether he was laughing or crying. Kale didn't say anything. Some speculations, perhaps as early as 60 years ago, had flashed through the subconscious mind, and then, along with the fragile humanity of ordinary people, were frozen and buried in that period of history. He had indeed become stronger, but he also appeared to be more ruthless. The height of evolution caused his bone marrow, blood, and even genes to reveal a unique nobility that was difficult to hide. He was incompatible with the ordinary people around him. But no matter what, Kale's soul was still human, a transmigrator from a distant parallel Earth. This essence wouldn't change even if thousands of years had passed. In room 301 and room 302, the dust finally settled. "What's your name?" Kale suddenly asked, baffled. The mysterious man was slightly stunned. He answered hesitantly, "You can call me the Apostle. I like this hero title very much." Kale shook his head and insisted, "I'm asking for your real name." The mysterious man paused and said slowly, Lu Chi Carter." Lu Chi, not a bad name." Kale nodded. He raised his left wrist and directly said to Vice in the form of an electronic watch, "Vice, add a name in the family Cal register file. Just call him Luke Carl." "Yes, master." Vice immediately obeyed the order. You're really, facing this scene, Lu Qi shook her head helplessly and stood up from the chair. All right, I should leave. As Lu Qi spoke, the night wind happened to blow in from the window. It brushed through the messy room, but it didn't blow up a single sleeve of his cloak. Under the slightly dim light, his small body was changing from solid to illusory. The shadow cast on the floor was no longer clear, as if he was about to evaporate into thin air in the room. So that's how it is. Kale only took a glance and said thoughtfully, you don't exist in this world, or in this Marvel universe. As expected of you. Lu Qi said with a smile, that's right. Others are fine, but as soon as I get close to you, I'll be rejected by this world and exiled to another world. In our world, this is called the Savior Exclusion Rule. But it's still worth it to be able to see you. When Lu Qi said this, her legs had already disappeared. Only the illusory image of her upper body was left. It was like a 3D projection unreal projected on the wall. Kale had never been good at expressing his feelings. At this moment, he calmly said, is there something you want me to know? Of course. Lu Qi nodded. She looked straight at him and quickly said, you don't have to worry about the spatial origin stone. It's always been by your side. You just haven't seen it yet. I already know this. Kale nodded. The corner of his mouth curved into a subtle arc. I'm afraid that a long time ago, when it was still a card, it was like an ability card. It gradually built a connection with my body and subtly changed my constitution and genes. He paused and then continued, if I have descendants, they might be able to control the spatial origin stone's derivative ability. What was left of Lu Qi's upper body trembled slightly. She opened her mouth to speak but found that she was close to the return stage. Her voice could no longer be transmitted. She could only raise her hands and quickly express her meaning with sign language, see you in the next dimension. I'll go and bring you back. Kale's words were very confident. He waved his hand in farewell. When the mysterious person was left with only a trace of her afterimage, he calmly narrated, you just said that you made a mistake in the past. Maybe it's not a mistake. It's just that it's not obvious. Lu Qi's last trace of her afterimage disappeared. The feeling of blurred space quieted down. This sentence subtly echoed back and forth in the room where only Kale was left. Kale stood in the same place and did not move. After a long silence, Vice asked tentatively, Master, just now, did you register the name I asked you to? Kale asked. It's registered. Vice quickly responded. That's good. As for the other things, even I'm not too sure. I'll slowly figure it out in the future. Kale thought about it and did not stay any longer. He walked out of the room and left. Lu Qi was really gone. She had left this world as he said. The world in that sentence did not refer to Earth, the Milky Way, the human countries, or the universe ruled by the divine dominion that was formed by the 9 realms. Instead, it was another parallel universe. Where are we going? Vice continued to ask. Nowhere. We've seized control of the remaining 2 aircraft carriers. We'll leave the rest to Fry, Steve, and Tawny. The farce between Hydra and SHELD can officially be declared over. From now on, there won't be any large organizations on Earth that can instigate a civil war. After Kyle concluded, he added meaningfully, it's time for us to go home. Chapter 299. It was just as Kyle had said. When one of Hydra's helicopter carriers used for Project Insight was seriously damaged and fell into a lake on the outskirts of New York, the other 2 were taken over by the god of artificial intelligence after the Vice seized control of the satellites and moved to Family Cal's overseas base. In addition, most of Hydra's hidden bases around the world were destroyed by Family Cal and the newly established the Avengers. Only a few remnants continued to exist. Without decades of development, they would no longer have the ability to pose a threat to the peace of the Earth. SHELD's forces suffered heavy losses in personnel and property after this turmoil, but after Kail's violent erasure, and later Yutong's special ability to read minds, SHELD became a blessing in disguise and became a real world-class organization without spies. Fry Nick, former director of SHELD, announced his official comeback as the third director of SHELD, after announcing the crime of director Pierre. This civil war farce, after Kail's intervention, can be said to be a great victory. Of course, there are also imperfections. For example, Captain America Steve, after fighting the Winter Soldier, returned alone from the outskirts of New York. His handsome and dirty face was full of frustration and helplessness. For example, Luna did not find Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch in the Hydra bases. It is suspected that they were urgently transferred to other places by the remnants of Hydra. Also, Kail, the symbol of peace, also returned alone to the Imperial Building in New York and did not go out later. The liquidation of Hydra was completely handed over to the family members and alliance members, and he did not take the initiative to intervene again. He seemed to have little interest in this, even if it was a civil war that endangered the Earth, he did not take it too seriously. It was as if Kail had casually walked out and slapped a buzzing and annoying fly to death. He then went home to take a nap, no matter how noisy the outside world was. Countless politicians and media wanted to see him, but they were all refused at the door. Hydra's turmoil and destruction. The civil strife on Earth caused by Hydra was only slightly calmed down after a month. SHELD began to rebuild, and after the return of superheroes and the birth of hero organizations, the surface of the Earth once again returned to its original stability and peace. Half a year later. 2009, early autumn. United States, New York City. In the bright sunshine of the early morning, modern steel buildings stood in great numbers, the breeze blew gently, and the temperature was just right. The streets and alleys gradually became noisy because of the activity of office workers. A black two-cylinder motorcycle slowly drove through the street. A black-haired young man wearing a leather jacket and jeans seemed to be very interested in everything in the city, his eyes constantly looking back and forth at everything around him. His name is Eddie Brock, a fresh graduate of college, but from today on, he is a real certified reporter. Boss, please give me a cup of hot milk and a hot dog and burger. Parking the motorcycle on the side of the road, Eddie got off, waved his hand and shouted at the roadside breakfast stall. Okay, take the milk first, please wait a moment for the burger. The old stall owner grinned and poured a glass of milk and handed it over. Eddie took it and drank most of it in one gulp, and exhaled comfortably. Cool. This unpretentious scene amused the stall owner. He roasted the hot dog and the burger and asked happily, "Young man, I don't think you are a local, and I've never seen you before." "Yes. I just graduated from Columbia and am a reporter. After the internship, I applied to work at the head office in New York a few days ago. I flew here yesterday, and I haven't reported to the company yet," Eddie said with a smile, his eyes looking gloomily at the city as he spoke. "I can see that you like New York City very much." The stall owner laughed and had a good impression of Eddie. "It's not that I like New York, it's that young people in the United States and all over the world like and look forward to New York, hoping to settle down here permanently." Eddie drank another mouthful of milk, wiped the residual stain on the corner of his mouth with his hand, and said with a little emotion, "New York, the city of economy, the city of tourism, the city of evolution, the city of peace, and the city of aliens." Eddie perfectly performed the occupational disease of a reporter. Once he started talking, he couldn't stop at all. "Especially the city of aliens, I like this name. You know, other countries or cities around the world are still debating the issue of aliens, but New York has already begun to communicate, deal with aliens, and even prepare for confrontation. Yesterday, I walked around the rented apartment building. Many places have signs for aliens. Even the public toilets, other than the ones for men, women, and the disabled, there are even public toilets for aliens. Also, there are some young people who are still in school. The mainstream topics of discussion are actually sports and fitness, about the development of human genes, evolution, and strengthening, unnatural phenomena, mecha technology, and ability mutations. Eddie couldn't help but laugh. He gestured with his hands and feet, getting more and more excited as he spoke. The stall owner also laughed and handed over the hamburger he made. He said with gratitude and respect, "Actually, there is also the stigma of the city of sin, but since half a year ago, the crime rate in this city has been decreasing day by day. As for tourism, evolution, peace, aliens, and other novel hot factors, it's all because of that one person." Eddie's eyes lit up slightly, and he naturally showed his admiration. He blurted out, "The symbol of peace, Mr. Kale." The stall owner laughed and said half seriously and half jokingly, "Young man, you're new to New York, and you're still in the reporter industry. Let me warn you, don't speak ill of Kyle here. Otherwise, even if the president comes, he won't be able to protect you. The locals of New York can drown you if they spit on you. I'm not that stupid." Eddie took the hamburger and looked around. Even the passers-by on the street had the symbol of the devil card branded on their casual clothes. The symbol of peace, Kale. Perhaps because he was born in New York and had a family and power stationed in the center of New York City, the older generation of locals here from the end of World War II regarded him as their savior. His return made the legendary hero's light completely envelop the city, and within half a year, it became unbreakable. In other areas, the symbol of peace might be a big enough hero's reputation, but in New York, the symbol of peace was a living god of humanity. It was not an exaggeration to say that the local residents of New York were believers of the symbol of peace. Eddie finished his hamburger, drank his milk, and paid the bill. He said firmly, "My dream is to be able to do the first exclusive news interview with Mr. Kale one day. Then you'll have to work hard. I'm looking at you, young man." The stall owner smiled and encouraged him. Interview the symbol of peace? This should be one of the ultimate goals of the career of the world's reporters. Chapter 300. From ancient times to the present. Some humans on Earth had already understood that in this vast universe, they were not alone. It was just that this universe with the 9 realms as its foundation was vast and boundless, like a huge forest with rich resources without borders. Under the long night, the races that lit up the light of civilization were like small hunters, living alone in each other's small circles. Only when one party made a gun and fired into the air could the other party vaguely detect the existence of the other party. In 965 AD, Norway on Earth was invaded by the frost giants from another layer of the world. The frost giants wanted to freeze Earth back to the Ice Age and transform it into their own territory in the human world. Later, they were punished by the god King Odin and the army of the god realm under his command. The frost box was sealed in Odin's treasury, and the frost giants were defeated and retreated back to the world of the frost giants. Therefore, in the Norse legends, there were records about the god realm, the Rainbow Bridge, Odin, Thor, and other extraterrestrial gods. During this period of thousands of years, there were beings from outer space who came to Earth under unknown circumstances and left again without exposing their identities. After thousands of years, the 21st century came, and humans finally began to have the technological capital to explore outer space. People who had no fear and respect, with great ambition, voluntarily pulled the trigger and fired the first shot into the dark forest of the universe. At this time, Earth, in a dark and lonely outer space. Near the orbit of Earth, a huge fire was burning inside the cabin of a spaceship. Suspended in the intact area, the surviving female astronaut was holding a suitcase. Her young and beautiful face was full of horror, floating in the weightless tube and quickly swimming away. In the tightly closed suitcase, in several tempered glass storage containers, there was a lump of unknown liquid moving around, violently knocking on the inner wall of the glass as if it wanted to escape. Hiss! In the space cabin area covered by destructive flames, the figure of a terrifying humanoid monster was revealed. It was like a snowman gradually melting in the high temperature, making a sharp and unpleasant sound. God, please protect me. The female astronaut kept muttering to herself. Finally, she looked at a family picture frame behind her, opened a space door in a corridor, dragged the suitcase and plunged into the space rescue capsule that was returning urgently. Half a minute later, one of the escape capsules left the space capsule that had completely collapsed and exploded, and directly below, it returned to the blue Earth with a faint halo. New York, Emperor Tower. As an unnatural firm, the locals of New York were already used to it. However, there were still people from all over the world coming in every day. The phenomenon of famous buildings serving as New York's semi-tourist attractions did not decrease but instead increased. Of course, this was also a door that Kale had specially opened for Family Cal to connect with the world. Now, it seemed that he had achieved his goal. Although entering and exiting the lobby on the first floor of the building required application and verification, there was still a large group of people blocking the inquiry window early in the morning and queuing up. Just as the hall was bustling with noise and excitement, two women suddenly entered the main entrance of the building side by side without being stopped by the guards. They walked through the hall and headed in the direction of the exclusive elevator. When everyone's eyes fell on them, they couldn't look away. Their eyes were wide open and they all held their breaths, causing the entire hall to become incomparably quiet in an instant. The two women were used to this. They were full of an unconcealable noble aura and a coldness that kept people 1,000 miles away. One of them had long black hair, a black dress, and black boots. Above her towering breasts was a touch of snow-white collarbone. The white face of the Oriental beauty was delicate and flawless. She walked elegantly like a blooming black rose. The other person was wearing a shirt and a suit that leaned towards men. Her short dark green hair was draped over her shoulders, and her exquisite Western beauty's face was as cold as ice. Her every move was far more domineering and handsome than a man's. Her coldness made countless peeping eyes cower in fear. Any one of them could attract 100% of the passers-by's attention when walking on the street, not to mention that the two of them were walking side by side at this time. They were simply attractive to men, women, old, and young. New York is so good. There are actually such superb beauties, and two of them appeared at the same time. Eddie, who was also sitting in the waiting chair in the hall, was stunned. His youthful hormones exploded and he swallowed his saliva madly. He wanted to take out the camera in his backpack to take a picture. He wanted to go to the company to report, but when he passed by the Dehao building, he couldn't help but come in to take a look. He didn't expect to encounter such a scene at this time. As soon as Eddie took out the camera, it was snatched away by the yellow-haired youth sitting next to him. "What are you doing?" Eddie looked at him discontentedly and lowered his voice subconsciously. "Brother, I'm saving you." The yellow-haired youth hid the camera under his coat, pointed to the guards with sunglasses standing in the corner, and whispered, "Are you new? Don't you know the rules? No photography is allowed in the Dehao building. Otherwise, you will have to bear the consequences. And you not only want to use the camera, but also want to take pictures of the two women. Aren't you harming people? It won't be good if the blood splashes on me." As the yellow-haired youth explained, his eyes reluctantly withdrew from the backs of the two women. Eddie also watched and asked with an itch in his heart, "Who are they? You are really new." The yellow-haired youth patted Eddie's shoulder and lowered his voice again, saying helplessly, "This is the woman of the owner of the building." Eddie's heart trembled, and he said regretfully, "I see." Naturally, no man dared to touch the woman who symbolized peace. It seemed that she heard their conversation. Luna's face was dyed with a light pink color, and she entered the exclusive elevator with Yutong. "That guy, don't tell me he hasn't gotten up yet?" "He's not a guy, call him boss." "Yutong, you can't spoil him. He hasn't gone out much in the past 6 months. He doesn't study armor technology, and doesn't care about the forces under him. He stays on the top floor all day to practice his divine power. If you dare to say these words in front of boss, then I have no objection. In the ascending elevator, Luna held Yutong's left arm and shook it gently, expressing her dissatisfaction. The two had a short conversation. After Yutong mentioned Kale, Luna's confidence was obviously not enough. She gritted her teeth and said angrily, "Of course I dare to say it." The exclusive elevator that required a high level of authority of the family went all the way to the top floor before stopping. After the elevator door opened, Luna let go of Yutong's arm and couldn't wait to step into the living room. "Boss, are you up? Do you want breakfast?" Luna said softly, like a good baby, without any of the complaining and domineering attitude from before. She wasn't afraid of anything, but she was afraid of boss. Only boss could teach her a lesson. Yutong laughed in her heart, and with a slight movement of her mind, an invisible force slowly swept through the space of the floor where they were. Yutong was slightly stunned and said, "Strange, boss isn't here." At the same time, Yutong's powerful mind went through the layers of walls and permeated the entire floor of the Dihao building. "How is it?" Luna asked anxiously. "No, boss left the Dihao building." Yutong frowned slightly. In the past 6 months, Kale basically didn't leave the Dihao building. The few times he went out, he would ask the two to accompany him in advance. Did something urgent happen? Yutong and Luna looked at each other, with a touch of worry in their eyes. Something that required Kale to do personally. Was this the end of the world? Chapter 301. Beep beep, the communicator on her body suddenly rang, and Yutong quickly took out the communicator to connect under Luna's anxious gaze. The faint blue light unfolded into a clear projection, projecting a small robot in the air. It grinned and said, "Good morning, ladies." "Good morning my ass, where is boss? Are you with him? If you don't hurry up and say it, I'll dismantle all your parts next time." Luna raised her cold and heroic eyebrows slightly. Vice coughed. Its original body was iron and vibranium metal, and Luna, who had the ability to control magnetic fields, happened to be its nemesis. It didn't dare to hide anything, and said with a slightly helpless mechanical face, "I am indeed with Master, but we have already left New York." Yutong's lips opened slightly, and said, "Boss went out so suddenly, and even the message was conveyed by you. What urgent matter happened?" Vice replied, "I don't know the specific reason. Master decided to go out in the morning, and Venom and I were a little surprised." "Where are you?" "I'll go there now." Luna was eager to move. She wanted Kale to go out before, but Kale ignored her. Now that Kale took the initiative to go out, she naturally didn't want to let go of this opportunity. "We have arrived at the destination, Mexico." Vice said in a deep voice, "Master asked me to inform you that you don't need to make a special trip here. Stay in New York City for the next 2 days, maybe something will happen." "That's boring." Luna crossed her arms and snorted discontentedly. "Something? Wasn't the Hydra organization taken care of half a year ago?" Yutong was thoughtful and understood the key points in Vice's message. "This time, I'm afraid it didn't originate from within the earth." Vice's tone was serious, and he pointed to the top of his head with his mechanical finger, which should be pointing to an unobstructed blue sky. Yutong's beautiful eyes widened, and whispered to herself, "The enemies that boss mentioned before, are they finally coming? Just in time, it just so happens that I'm very bored. In this half a year, the proficiency of my ability has improved greatly." Luna licked her lips excitedly. Vice Microchip felt a chill run down his spine as he observed a 3-second moment of silence for the invaders. The creatures outside the universe probably didn't know how dangerous Earth was right now. On the other side. North America, Mexico, near Old Bridge Town. Under the scorching sun, the area within a radius of a few kilometers was nothing but a barren desert with no weeds. Whenever the wind blew, it would stir up a disgusting cloud of dust. In this area, there were only a few small towns and villages, let alone big and small cities. The buildings in the small towns were simple and modern, as if a cowboy would come out on a horse at any time. A bus-like travel vehicle was parked at the entrance of the town. There were all kinds of camping equipment, detection equipment, clothes, food, and so on. 2 young girls in fashionable jeans and casual leather jackets were sitting in the driver's seat and the passenger's seat respectively. They looked to be in their early 20s and had just graduated from university. The girl in the driver's seat had a cute and beautiful face, but she always maintained a serious and old-fashioned look. She was seriously fiddling with the equipment and checking some detection data recorded in her notebook. The girl in the front passenger seat was wearing a pair of red glasses. Her precocious and extremely charming face was filled with a relaxed expression. She had a lollipop in her mouth and her feet were resting on the steering wheel in boredom. The 2 of them would be rare beauties even if they were in a big city with a lot of people. However, at this moment, they were a little spoiled and were huddled in the car like workaholics. "Dear Jane, will your mentor really come?" The girl in glasses looked at the endless wilderness outside the window and asked in boredom. "Daisy, this is the 8th time I've answered you." The girl called Jane looked up helplessly and put down the notebook in her hand. She said with certainty, "After I sent the detection data to my mentor last night, he said that he's willing to help. He said that he'll come to this town before tonight and go to the wilderness with us for a second detection. Then let's wait a little longer." Daisy pushed her glasses and said with a sigh, "You're the one who needs to do astronomical research. I'm an economics major, I should be lying in the hotel and enjoying the sauna. Why do I have to come to this godforsaken place to eat dirt with you?" Jane comforted her, "I'll treat you to a big meal when we get back. Hold on for a few more days. Maybe we'll get the ideal data tonight and we can return tomorrow or the day after." "I hope so," Daisy said and suddenly heard the sound of a car engine. She couldn't help but poke her head out of the window with a cap on. She saw an old Ford coming to the town gate, kicking up dust along the way. "Jane, is that your mentor?" Daisy asked. "Maybe. Let's get out and see." Jane called out to Daisy and the 2 got out of the caravan. When they came to the front of the car, the Ford stopped right next to them. "Little Foster, you really know how to order people around." The door opened and a middle-aged old man with white hair combed back and simple dark-style clothes walked out of the driver's seat with a smile. "Mentor, thank you so much for being able to come." Jane smiled and quickly greeted him. She pointed to Daisy behind her and said, "This is my good friend, Daisy." "Hello, Professor." Daisy held the lollipop in her mouth and bowed politely. "This is my university mentor, Professor Eric Selvig." Jane introduced the middle-aged old man to Daisy. "Hello, Daisy. Just call me Eric. Don't call me Professor." Eric was very approachable. His wrinkled face was cool and youthful. Jane said quickly, "Since we're all here, let's go to the town first. After we finish dinner, we can get ready to go to the survey site." Eric waved his hand and said, "Jane, don't be anxious. Don't worry, I have a guest in my car." "Guest?" Jane and Daisy were stunned. "Yes." Eric nodded and turned back to the side of the Ford. He asked the slightly rolled-down window of the back seat, "Mr. Card, is it convenient for you to get off? I'll introduce you to the 2 students on this trip." The person in the car didn't respond, but after a while, the door abruptly opened. A tall young man with silver hair mixed with red hair. He wore a pair of slightly large sunglasses and a black windbreaker that wrapped up to his calves. He stepped out of the car in boots. "Wasn't this Kale? This is a friend of mine. He's the person in charge of a high-tech company. He and..." Eric paused and almost spilled the beans. He smiled awkwardly and continued, "He and I met at a scientific conference. He saw the data you sent yesterday and was interested, so he wanted to come and take a look." Kale glanced at the two girls through his sunglasses and said faintly, "You can call me Card. I hope you have a pleasant trip." Chapter 302. Inside Old Bridge Town. The sun was setting in the west. The red glow of the sunset still had a place in the dark blue night sky. The curtain of night had quietly shrouded this western town located in the wilderness of the outskirts. The locals who had worked for the day had returned one after another. Warm lights were switched on in every household. Some down-to-earth bars and restaurants were gradually becoming more popular. Many people gathered in twos and threes to eat meat and drink wine. In a bar-cum-restaurant, Kale and the others gathered around a square table near the window. The men sat on one side and the women on the other. There were large glasses of beer and small plates of peanuts on the table. In the beginning, both Jane and Daisy were suspicious of Kale's identity. However, since the intermediary was Professor Eric, and after checking his personal information on the internet and finding that it matched, they finally agreed that Kale was a fellow visitor. The dishes haven't been served yet. I'll go to the bathroom first. Jane, please entertain Mr. Card for me with your friend, Eric instructed before hurriedly leaving his seat and walking to the bathroom outside the bar counter. In fact, he had been itching to go to the bathroom for a long time. However, it did not seem good to let this person stay with the two students. Now, he finally could not help himself. After Eric walked away, Daisy pouted her delicate lips and muttered in a weak voice that only she and Jane could hear, "I also want someone to entertain me when I come to this damn place." Jane inadvertently glanced at her friend and hinted with her right elbow to poke her body. Daisy let out an ouch and began to eat peanuts sullenly. "It's so good to be young," Kale thought to himself. He pursed his lips lightly and took a sip of the foamy beer from his beer glass. This scene surprised Jane. She said in surprise, "Mr. Card, you're drinking beer? I thought you were a member of the upper class. There's no difference between drinking red wine that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and beer that costs dozens of dollars. It's just that drinking the more expensive one can raise one's status and social status." Kale's face was elegant and gentle. The corner of his mouth curved into a gentle smile. After meeting the mysterious man in the Tacunio Club, he seemed to have completely integrated into the human society on Earth in the past 6 months. He was no longer as cold and rational as the Taishang Wangqing. From his flesh and blood to his genes, to his soul to his temperament, the noble aura that was incompatible with ordinary people, and the pressure of an expert were all dormant. Now, from the outside to the inside, Kale was just an ordinary earthling. This was the Card control that had achieved self-perfection. Not only had his temperament returned to normal, even his fire divine power had made great progress. The red hair in the middle of his silver bangs was proof of this. Kale was not arrogant. He immediately closed the distance between the people at the table. Daisy took a sip of beer and said casually, "Hey, you're Carl, right? It's already so late. Why do you insist on wearing sunglasses?" Jane stared at Kale across the table. She was also suspicious. If he was a researcher who was used to observing the stars in the night sky, he would never wear sunglasses at night. "I forgot." "Okay, I'll take it off." Kale nodded. After putting down the beer glass, he took the initiative to reach out and take off his sunglasses. The sunglasses were placed under the table and immediately attached to his left wrist. It quickly and mechanically transformed, silently merging with the original electronic watch. You are." Daisy stared straight at Kale's face. Just when Kale thought that she had recognized him, Daisy took a deep breath and exclaimed, "You are too young and handsome." Kale was speechless. "You are indeed handsome, but why do I feel like I've seen you somewhere before?" Jane said blankly. "A lot of people say so." Kale smiled and started the topic humorously. He suddenly remembered. Fortunately, before leaving New York, in order to avoid being recognized by others, he made slight adjustments to his appearance with venom. Strangers would not recognize his original identity at first glance. In addition, in the past 6 months, Kale had become 1 or 2 years younger, returning to the age of 20. Even the members of the Avengers found it hard to believe. The others either remained the same or grew older with each passing day. Only Kyle remained youthful, and at the same time, he was healthy and energetic. So young, I think I can call you little brother. I will protect you. Daisy smiled charmingly and gave Kale a naive look. Just after returning from the toilet, Eric happened to hear Daisy's words. He was so shocked that he almost fell. He held onto the table and chair to stop himself from falling. Jane quickly got up and stepped forward to support Eric. She asked, "Mentor, are you okay?" "I'm fine." Eric waved his hand and sat back in the chair. He looked at Daisy, cleared his throat and solemnly said, "Mr. Card is my friend." "What do you mean by little brother?" "I'm just kidding." Daisy was angry, but her eyes looking at Kale became more and more enthusiastic. Jane secretly pinched Daisy a few times and gave up after failing to do so. To be honest, even she, a scientific researcher, would believe in love at first sight if she had not experienced her first love. After all, the young man named Card in front of her, although there were still many mysteries that had not been exposed, was already impeccable. He looked gentle and kind, and gave people a sense of security. Coupled with his perfect figure and appearance, as well as his superior and wealthy identity, he was simply a prince in a fairy tale movie. But because he was too perfect, so perfect that it was unreal, Jane had a trace of doubt in her heart. Also, her mentor's attitude towards Card was polite and respectful with an unconcealable awe. After the hot barbecue was on the table, they stopped talking and began to wipe out the food on the table to prepare for the field exploration in the second half of the night. Kale blended into this small circle and played the small role he designed. His deep eyes looked out of the window from time to time to the bright night sky. If it was to deal with the enemy, he would not have bothered to go through the trouble of disguising his identity and specially establish a friendly relationship with 3 ordinary people. It was only because this time, it was a guest who came to Earth. To be more precise, it was a special friend. Odin, that old man, why did he have to make me do this job? Kale thought helplessly and quickly finished his meat without losing his grace. After the group finished eating, they got on the station wagon together. Jane drove the car away from the town and set off for the dark wilderness. Late at night, the night sky was dotted with stars, and night fell on the earth. 2 bright lampposts shone through the dark fog. The roar of the car's engine could be heard as it sped through the barren desert. Kale sat in the front passenger seat with his eyes closed, while Daisy and Eric were in the rear compartment. Both of them were holding survey instruments and reporting the situation in real time. The radiation value is greatly increasing, obviously several times stronger than yesterday. We are approaching that area. The direction is right. Then sit tight. Jane reminded and slammed on the accelerator, increasing the station wagon's speed by a notch. No one noticed that in the night sky directly facing the station wagon, the black clouds were broken, and the stars were spinning into a cluster, glowing with circles of wonderful colorful halos. Kale suddenly opened his eyes and said to himself inexplicably, "It's about time. Earth welcomes you." Chapter 303. 10 miles outside of Old Bridge Town. In the sky above the desert, the stars formed a nebula that looked like an aurora. During this period of time, the colorful lights flowed as if something was about to fall from it. The van suddenly came to a stop. The wheels scraped out 2 tracks and raised a cloud of dust before it came to a stop directly below the center of the colorful nebula. "It's here. Hurry up and record the data for me." Jane stepped on the brakes and picked up the notebook placed beside her. She decisively ordered her friend Daisy and mentor Eric in the back of the van. Kale was secretly shocked. This girl looked quite cute, but he didn't expect her to be as strong and direct as a workaholic when it came to work. However, his mind wasn't on the few people in the van. Instead, he was keenly aware of the surrounding turbulence in the air and the disturbed space. As far as Cale knew, there were only two things that could cause this kind of spatial disorientation when several layers of worlds were connected together. The first was the activation of the dimensional stone. The second was the activation of the Rainbow Bridge. Cale lowered his eyelids and looked at the three people who were busy in the van. He shrugged and reminded, "Be careful. Maybe something will fall." What could it be? Daisy muttered and looked up at the skylight of the van. Her eyes were wide open and her mouth was so wide that even the lollipop in her mouth fell out. In the middle of the nebula, something like a meteorite fell from it. The friction with the atmosphere turned into a large fireball, quickly dispersing the darkness of the night sky. Oh my God! Before Daisy could react, the experienced Eric had already slammed the seat and shouted, "Jane! Hurry up and drive! Get out of here!" Got it. Jane was one of the calmest people in the van other than Cale. She put down the notebook and immediately shifted gears. Stepping on the accelerator, the van rushed out between the roar of the engine and the roar of the wheels. As soon as the van left the spot, the blazing meteorite fell with great force on the desert surface 10 meters behind the van. Boom! Like a bomb exploding with gunpowder, countless gravel and dust splashed in all directions. The sweeping wave of dust pushed the station wagon forward. After surviving the disaster, Daisy patted her heaving chest. "Jane, I'm never going out with you again. A meteorite just happened to fall." "This is the first time I've encountered such a coincidence," Eric said with a lingering fear. "Fortunately, they're all fine." Jane breathed a sigh of relief and operated the driving instrument. She even turned around to confirm the situation in the back seat. Cale's face was calm as he reclined on the seat, as if the scene just now was not dangerous at all. He reminded him in a low voice, "Drive carefully." The reminder came a little too late. Jane had just looked at the windshield when the front of the station wagon hit something, making a loud and dull sound. Jane stepped on the emergency brake subconsciously and stopped the car completely. Under the bright car lights, she could vaguely see a man in black lying on the ground in front of her. She said in shock, "I think I bumped into someone." "No, to be more precise, it was a god." "You're driving and you've bumped into a god." Cale secretly held his forehead but didn't say anything. Only Vice and Venom were happily communicating with each other using some kind of unique sound wave. "Ahahaha, Thor, you also have a day like this." "That's right, in this open Bifrost, the one who fell was Thor himself." 3 days ago, Cale received the gatekeeper's order to prepare to return to the Divine Realm through the Bifrost. As the guardian of the Divine Realm, he would observe the succession ceremony of Thor, the son of Odin, Thor, as the Divine Realm's guardian. As a result, this morning, the succession ceremony was cancelled, and he was temporarily replaced as the master to secretly take care of Thor's mortal training. As for why Thor came to Earth in such a sorry way, even if Cale didn't get the gatekeeper's order in advance, he could guess that the incident in the Divine Realm was inevitable. Thor had already held the hammer of Thor, a symbol of power. He was the successor of the divine king that Odin had decided. As the god of trickery, Loki was naturally unhappy. This time, seeing that the succession ceremony was imminent, he finally couldn't help but play a little trick. Well, to put it simply, it was a large-scale family farce caused by two brothers competing for the father's favor. Jane and the other two had already gotten out of the car and surrounded the black-clothed man, anxiously checking his physical condition. Cale sat steadily in the co-pilot's seat, his heart unperturbed. He cast a slightly sympathetic gaze to the front. He could sense that Thor's divine power was now sealed. This was Odin's method. "Please, don't die, don't die." Jane knelt on the ground and kept pushing Thor's body with her hands. Under the stimulation of his muscles, Thor's eyes suddenly widened. His shoulder-length blonde hair was scattered, and he reflexively straightened his back and roared at the sky. This scene scared Jane and Eric. They reached out to stop him, but even if they had lost their divine power, Thor's strength was still not something they could resist. Seeing that Thor was about to break free, Daisy exclaimed and took out something from her jacket pocket. She turned on the switch and stabbed it forward into Thor's strong body. A faint blue electric current poured into Thor's body. He twitched slightly, then rolled his eyes and fell to the ground. Thor was stunned by the electric shock. There seemed to be nothing wrong with that. Vice, did you take a picture? Kale in the car snapped his fingers. Dark history, this was definitely the dark history of the future king of gods. Of course, I also copied and saved it. Vice let out a gentlemanly chuckle. Give me a copy. Venom said as if he wanted to share something good. The night was long. Thor was not the only guest from outer space tonight. At this time, on the outskirts of New York, a corner of the night sky was illuminated red. A rescue capsule shuttled through the atmosphere. The painted shell was wrapped in flames. It fell into the forest like a meteorite, raising dust and sizzling smoke. After a while, a row of motorcade marked with the logo of the biogenetics company surrounded the rescue capsule. The personnel equipped with firearms and wearing protective clothing quickly got out of the vehicle. They opened the rescue capsule with tools and transferred the unconscious female astronaut in the capsule and all objects to a large vehicle. When it was the silver suitcase's turn, several researchers were excited. They carefully took out the suitcase and placed it on a specific delivery vehicle. After the rescue capsule was transferred to a large transport vehicle, the motorcade started in a row and slowly returned to the direction of downtown New York. No one noticed. In the middle of the vehicle, at this time, in the silver suitcase, there were 4 glass tanks containing mysterious liquid creatures. One of them was full of cracks, smelly air, and the smell of the same kind. Chapter 304. Old Bridgetown, Emergency Room 3 on the second floor of a large hospital. It was late at night. Initially, there were not many patients. However, when Kale and the rest arrived, almost all the doctors and nurses in the hospital gathered here. Father, Heimdall. Open the Bifrost and let me go back. What is this place? Damn it, how dare you attack the son of Odin? It was as if a war was going on in the emergency room. A tall and strong blond man wearing only a black shirt and pants was lying on the white hospital bed with his arms and legs spread out. He was shouting inexplicable words in agitation. There were more than 5 doctors and nurses in total. They could not stop him and were almost thrown to the floor. Call the guards. Call the guards. The doctors had never seen such a strong patient. They screamed in horror. A few guards who heard the screams ran down the corridor and entered the emergency room to help stop the fight. Then, outside the emergency room, Kale and the rest were waiting on the chairs in the corridor. Through the transparent glass window, they could see Thor screaming like a madman. The doctors, nurses, and guards swarmed forward and surrounded him to restrict his movements. Thor was forced to lean against the door. His rugged face was distorted. He tried to preserve his last bit of dignity and growled, "You're just mortals. You can't defeat the mighty Thor." Before he could finish, the attending doctor injected him with a sedative. Thor's eyes rolled back and he lost the strength to fight back. His body was dizzy and he slid to the ground. Outside the door, the crowd who was watching the turn of events fell into a short silence. "Do you think Jane knocked him silly?" Daisy shrunk her neck and asked weakly. "It's not like he hit his head." "Even if he's silly, he must have been electrocuted by you," Jane retorted. Her beautiful eyes were filled with worry. "Didn't you hear what he said just now? Odin, Bifrost, Thor." Eric reminded them softly. Seeing the 2 students' confused expressions, he explained bitterly, "That's something from Norse mythology. I grew up listening to these myths. So? The three of them looked at each other, and then looked at Kyle, who had been silent all this time. Why are you looking at me? Kyle chuckled and shrugged. Roaming the wastelands alone at night, shouting about the God King, the divine realm, and whatnot. I think it's some kind of Chunibu disease that's become popular recently. Chunibu? Everyone was stunned. They had also heard of this new term before. Now, it seemed to match the characteristics of the mysterious man's delusions. Yes. It's a serious case of Chunibu. Kale said. Secretly, Vice and Venom were laughing so hard that they almost couldn't maintain their disguise. Everyone wanted to continue the discussion, but Kale got up from the chair and walked towards the stairs. He waved his hand and said, "Well, that's it for tonight. I'll find a place to catch up on my sleep. Tomorrow morning, we'll discuss the survey data from last night. Thank you for your hard work. You can call me anytime tomorrow." Eric responded quickly and respectfully. He also walked Kale half a corridor. After Kale's figure disappeared at the stairs on the second floor of the hospital, Eric returned with a sigh. Only then did he notice that Jane and Daisy were staring at him suspiciously. "Well, I'm going to rest too." Eric's heart thumped as he scratched his head and said. "Wait." Jane and Daisy, one on the left and one on the right, stepped forward and pulled Eric back to his original seat. Jane cleared her throat and asked in a deep voice, "Mentor, that Mr. Card, what is his identity?" Eric said with a wry smile, "Didn't I introduce him already? He's a friend of mine, the head of a research company." "Who are you kidding? Just a company head. How can a well-known astronomer and university professor be so timid?" Daisy snorted coldly. Eric blinked innocently and said helplessly, "Is it obvious?" Jane and Daisy nodded at the same time and said in unison, "It's obvious." "Okay." Eric thought for a while and said straightforwardly, "You don't have to ask me about Mr. Card's identity. When he wants you to know, you will naturally know. If he doesn't want you to know, even if you give me 10 times the courage, I wouldn't dare to reveal it easily." "I won't ask again." Jane nodded thoughtfully. Daisy said suspiciously, "So exaggerated. Could he be the mayor of New Mexico?" Hearing this sentence, Eric's slightly aged face remained serious and serious. He said faintly, "There's no comparison, it's far worse. If you use the President of the United States as an analogy, it's more like it." Jane and Daisy looked at each other, both of their eyes full of horror. Compared to the President of the United States? Was this identity so big that it could reach the sky? Looking at the shocked expressions of the two students, Eric bickered, but there was one sentence that he didn't add in the end. "The President, from a certain point of view, seems incomparable." It was almost dawn at night. The sky in the east was turning white. The morning light shone on the desert outside the town, and the darkness disappeared like the tide. In the wilderness where Jane and the others were hit by a meteorite last night, a pit with a radius of 10 meters sunk into the ground. There was no meteorite or alien spacecraft wreckage in the center, only a small silver hammer standing on top of it. Whoosh! The shadow fell close to the ground, and the strong wind blew the sand and stones into the air. Kyle retracted his dark wings and stood calmly in the inner circle of the pit. He looked at the simple hammer with his golden eyes. The watch on his left wrist projected a blue light, scanning the hammer and the surrounding ground inch by inch. Vice said emotionally, "With the current technology and databases, it's impossible to analyze." "Master, is this Thor's hammer?" "Of course, it's the real deal." Kale nodded and said, "According to Odin, whoever can hold this hammer and deserves it will have the power of Thor and be crowned the king of the divine realm." With that, he bent down slightly, stretched out his right hand, and firmly grasped the handle of the hammer with his palm. "Master, you," Vice's words stopped, but Kale, who was channeling his divine power, easily picked up Thor's hammer and weighed it in his hand. "You really picked it up?" "Master, won't you be the king of the divine realm then? Venom said incredulously. You two are thinking too much, it's not that simple. Kale shook his head and smiled, holding the hammer, and said without the slightest arrogance, it's not just Thor and me, there will be more people who can lift this hammer in the future. In fact, as long as you have the ability of divine power, a pure heart without any distracting thoughts, and no strong selfish desire for power, you will be qualified to lift Thor's hammer. But what Odin, the king of the gods, said. Weiss raised a point that he still did not understand. You believe that old man Odin's words? Kale tried to swing the hammer and said, think about it, who did Odin say those words to? It was the two princes who were still young at the time, Thor and Loki. In other words, only one of them can lift the hammer to fulfill the condition of being crowned king. As for Thor and Loki, Odin already knew who among them can lift Thor's hammer. This Thor's hammer is just a pretense and a test. At this point, Kale sighed slightly, and put Thor's hammer back to its original position without hesitation. The hammer is good, but it doesn't suit me. It seems that a divine weapon that is truly suitable for me still needs to be slowly gathered and forged. Chapter 305. The hammer with one hand touched the desert ground, stirring up a small cloud of dust. It stood upright on the spot and returned to its original simple and ordinary appearance after the divine power was stripped away. You left the hammer here? Weiss felt a little regretful. After all, this was Thor's hammer. It was a perfect attack and support type divine weapon. What else? Bring it home? Not to mention Saul, who knows if Odin will come knocking on our door because of this. This is a hot potato. Kyle was not regretful at all. He had seen through the situation very clearly. Thor's hammer. This was a beginner-level divine weapon that Odin had specially made for Thor after he was born. It was a transitional weapon for him to grow from a child to a god-king. If others wanted to take it for themselves, they would have to ask for Thor's permission first. Even if Thor agreed, Odin would not let the hammer that symbolized the power of the divine territory's king fall into the hands of others so easily. Moreover, this hammer was specially made for Thor's lightning divine power. Kale, the god of fire, had no reason to fall out with Odin over this beginner-level divine weapon. It's an eternal divine weapon. The materials are hard to find, but I can still use the eternal fire for now. Kale turned around. Seeing that the sun was already out, he spread his dark wings and prepared to return to town. However, Weiss suddenly called, Master, there's a call. There's a call for you from home. Home? Kale did not think too much and nodded to answer the call. With a beep, Weiss' transformed watch projected a model of the upper body of a beauty. The Oriental-style face was exquisite and perfect. Even her long black hair was delicate and flawless. Boss, it's time to say, good morning, on your side. Yutong also saw Kale's projection and greeted with a smile. What's the matter? Tell me. Kale looked at Yutong's projection and asked. Yutong didn't procrastinate and narrated, just a few hours ago, an ordinary person came to the office and claimed that he was in the outskirts of New York and witnessed the scene of a meteorite falling at night. He also took a video with a certain clarity value. I sent a technician to the scene to investigate and found obvious traces similar to the landing of an escape capsule. There were also tire tracks of different types of vehicles receiving escape capsules. Interestingly, I asked Natasha. With SHELD's resources, she could not find out which country's escape capsule was from. Since it could not be found on the surface, it meant that the escape capsule was from outer space, or it was a private product of non-country. Kyle understood. He snapped his fingers and said, "Go on." Weiss and Venom, on the other hand, were very interested in such matters and listened quietly. If it was any other area, I'm afraid it would take some time to find, but the fleet that received the escape capsule came from New York. Yutong said with a smile on her thin eyebrows. Even Kale could not help but shake his head. New York? Don't you know whose territory New York is now? Family Cal, S-H-E-L-D, and Stark Industries. When the three of them were closely intertwined, Family Cal was a living tyrant in New York, whether it was on the surface or in the dark. Yu Tong did not look at the files. With her super memory, she said with great familiarity, "So, I quickly found out the origin of the escape capsule and the fleet. It came from a large private company called the Life Foundation, in Queens, New York. The boss is Carlton Drake. Half a year ago, he invested tens of billions of dollars in a joint venture to build aviation equipment. He's passionate about genetic mutations caused by cosmic radiation." Kale touched his chin and narrowed his eyes. "It's just a private company without any special background. Since you found out the origin, you should have already taken action and obtained some inside information, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have specially informed me." "Of course." Yu Tong raised her smooth chin like a little girl who was encouraged. She waved her hand gently and said, "This is an internal confidential video that I sent K2 to sneak into the Life Foundation and intercepted from the internal archives." The 3D projection was transferred. Kale began to receive the video and play it. In the video, the camera was facing a completely enclosed research room with tempered glass and a floor. There were all kinds of equipment and instruments inside. A tramp in ragged clothes was locked inside. Outside the room, there were many staff members in suits or protective clothing. "What do you want to do to me? Get me out of here." The tramp's face was furious. He looked at the people who were surrounding him as a test subject and banged his hands on the glass door. "Let's begin." Outside the room, a middle-aged man in a suit said decisively. A female staff member raised her hand and voiced her opinion in a low voice, "Boss, I'm sorry. Boss, those symbiotic demons should be studied separately. We shouldn't conduct human experiments now. Only through human experiments can we communicate with them faster. If you don't want to do it, you can quit." The man who was called boss retorted coldly. Then he continued, "Hurry up and start." "Yes." The rest of the staff members answered. They all got into position and operated the computer to turn on the switch. In the research room, a storage device slowly turned on after a slight sound and a cloud of white smoke. "Oh my God, what the hell is that?" The tramp felt a chill run down his spine. He turned around and happened to see a ball of dark gray liquid flowing out of the storage device as if it had life and consciousness. It slid across the floor and approached his body. Puff! The tramp was still screaming in horror. The dark gray liquid crawled along his feet to his chest and finally seeped into his clothes and disappeared into his body. "Look, it worked." The boss waved his fist excitedly. However, he was only happy for a few seconds. The tramp in the research room suddenly fell to the ground. He curled up into a ball and twitched in pain. In 3 seconds, he stopped struggling and turned into a corpse. After a while, the mouth of the tramp's corpse opened. The dark gray liquid gushed out and slammed against the glass door angrily. It failed. The boss's smile froze on his face. He sighed and said in a dignified voice, "Continue the human experiments. Also, other than the one we have, find the 3 symbiotic demons that escaped during the transportation process." The video ended there. Yu Tong's projection was restored. Seeing Kale's serious expression, she asked, "Boss, do you know those symbiotic demons?" "It's not that simple." When Kale said this, Venom's body became restless. "Same, kind?" Venom muttered to himself. Kale frowned and said, "It was just a casual reminder from the gatekeeper, Heimdall, that something from outer space was coming to Earth. I didn't expect it to be this kind of alien." Symbiotic demons. In addition to Venom, which was derived from the card drawing system, and Carnage, which was split from Venom, there were more than 4 of them. Moreover, 3 of them were out of control somewhere in the New York area. It would be troublesome to leave these creatures alone. Chapter 306. Yutong hadn't seen the family head's face so serious even during the S.H.E.L.D. Civil War incident last time. It was obvious that the enemy they were dealing with this time wasn't an ordinary small fry. "Boss, what should we do?" Yutong asked and handed the decision-making power back to Kale. "Let me think about it. I have something to do here as well. I have to stay in New Mexico for a few days." Kale pondered and suddenly thought of something. He asked Venom telepathically, "Venom, if it were you, what would you do first when you arrived in an unfamiliar alien area?" "Adapt." Venom responded without hesitation and explained, "We symbiotic creatures can only survive in the true sense by attaching ourselves to other creatures. So when we come to an unfamiliar area, the first thing we will do is to find a suitable native life form for symbiosis and adapt to the local life." Then what?" Kale asked. Venom's voice was slightly cold and hoarse as he said, "Symbiotic creatures have a certain degree of territorial awareness and will leave a unique scent in the area where they are active. If the local area has long been occupied by other symbiotic creatures of the same kind, the foreign symbiotic creatures that adapt to the local environment will come to challenge them. Then the foreign symbiotic creatures should be lucky. There is a symbiotic king who just happened to leave New York." Kale smiled faintly and thought for a while before instructing Yutong, "Those symbiotic creatures have just arrived in New York. They will probably endure for a while and look for suitable strong humans to attach themselves to. During this time, family Cal members are strictly prohibited from going out alone. Spread out in teams of 3 throughout the city to secretly observe. After discovering symbiotic creatures, don't rashly engage in battle. I'll leave it to you and Luna, or inform the Avengers to deal with it. As for the Biological Genetic Association, inform Fry first and let S.H.E.L.D. put pressure on them to investigate. We can't let everything be solved by our family." Kale said and finally reminded, "By the way, don't let those symbiotic creatures get close to you. Otherwise, it will be difficult to deal with them." "Okay, I got it." Yutong nodded solemnly. This was the family Cal's first time dealing with an alien creature. This was also the first time that Earth had tried to deal with an alien invasion with its own forces and power without relying on the divine dominion. This is just the beginning. There will be more in the future on a larger scale. Let's just treat this as a test. After Kale said softly, he hung up the phone and flapped his dark wings in the air behind him. After stirring up a strong sandstorm, Kale soared into the air from his original spot. Along with circles of white waves bursting forth, he broke through the sound barrier like a black flowing light and left the wilderness desert. Kale had just left. An old car drove past the crater and stopped at the edge of the crater. A middle-aged local opened the door, got out of the car, and walked forward. He looked at the huge crater below with a blank expression, as well as the silver hammer in the middle of it. At this moment, in downtown New York, Emperor Tower. After Yutong gave the order, the unnatural firm announced a temporary suspension of business. The time of resumption was not set. They only explained to the public that it was due to internal reasons. Cadis in the New York area formed teams of 3 and maintained a 24-hour audio connection with the headquarters. They began to search for traces of the alien symbiotic entity. On the other side, in a shabby rental apartment building near downtown Brooklyn. Sure enough, all companies are the same. They don't treat newcomers as humans. After being ordered around by his boss and colleagues for an entire day, reporter Eddie dragged his sore and tired body upstairs. The shabby and cheap monthly rental apartment naturally did not have a high-end item like an elevator. He could only climb up the stairs tiredly. Straight up to the 5th floor, Eddie walked through a corridor with many doors. When he was about to reach the room he rented, he saw a bald man standing in front of the door of the room directly opposite his house. He was holding a black plastic bag that kept swinging in his hand. "Hey, neighbor." Eddie wiped his sweat and waved his hand in a friendly manner. The bald man heard him and looked to the side. His dark eyes were filled with indifference and coldness. He stared at Eddie with vigilance and coldness. Eddie retracted his arm and scratched the back of his head. He said awkwardly, "Sorry to disturb you." Eddie hurried to the door of his room and nervously took out the key from his pocket. He could feel the bald man's gaze on his back. He pushed the door open and only opened a gap that allowed one person to pass through. He quickly went in, slammed the door firmly and locked it. After completing a series of steps, Eddie leaned his back against the door and complained helplessly, "Terrible neighbor. Strange neighbor." Outside the door, the bald man also spat. He slowly took out the key, opened the door of his house, and stepped in. There was nothing in the room except for a simple bed and chair. The black curtains were tightly drawn. After the only source of light was the door closed, the space inside the room was completely dark. The bald man sat on the chair and took out a lively sea fish from his bag. He opened his mouth and bit off a piece of raw fish. He ate it in big bites. The bald man fell into deep thought as he ate. He was Toxin. His birthplace was on planet Sokka, which was several galaxies away from Earth. He was guided by something in the dark to find the meaning of his existence and came to Earth. Of course. Toxin came to Earth half a year ago. He lived in an indigenous village in Africa for 2 to 3 months. He stayed in Asia for a few months. He moved to Europe for another few months. During that time, he changed 5 human hosts and became familiar with and integrated into the human society on Earth. Finally, he followed a clue and came to New York in the United States. When he came to New York, Toxin sensed the presence of his only kin. He thought that he could quickly solve some of the mysteries on his body. Who would have thought that the sudden alien invasion would mess up the key presence of several symbiotic demons in New York? Now, the presence of symbiotic demons from different regions gathered in New York. They attracted and repelled each other. It was difficult to tell them apart. I can only find them one by one and eliminate them. I hope you have the information I need. Toxin was expressionless as he finished the fish in his hand. The distance between planet Sokka and Earth and the decades of space wandering could not stop him. There was no reason for him to stop at his own kind. Whoever stood in his way, he would just kill them. Old Bridge Town. Back in town, Kale went straight to the restaurant. When he opened the door, he found that Jane and the other 2 were not the only ones sitting at the table in the corner. There was also Thor, who was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. "Brother Ka, over here." Daisy's seat was facing the door. She was the first to see Kale. She quickly got up and waved in surprise. When Kale walked over, Eric had already made way for him. He said respectfully and fawningly, "Mr. Ka, I've already asked the chef to prepare your meal. I'll have him heat it up and send it over." "Ka, good morning." Jane finished chewing the food in her mouth and greeted Kale with a smile. "Morning." Kale nodded and sat next to Thor. Thor was starving. He was still stuffing beef into his mouth. When he saw the 3's enthusiastic attitude towards Kale, he could not help but stare angrily. "Wait, why is there such a big difference in treatment between him and me?" Chapter 307. TSK. You're just a tramp, and the card is an urban elite, how can you compare? Daisy immediately choked on Thor, hugged her towering breasts with both hands, and snorted discontentedly. "And let me remind you, everything you wear and eat now is given to you by us out of kindness, don't ask for too much." "How am I a tramp? I'm just an ignorant mortal." Thor swallowed the beef in his mouth, wiped the grease from the corner of his mouth, and picked up a fried chicken leg. His rough face showed a serious look, and he said with a little dignity, "I'll say it again. I'm the son of the supreme Odin, Thor the master of thunder, Thor, the future lord of the 9 realms." Everyone at the table looked natural, as if they were used to it, and quietly bowed their heads and continued to eat. Thor saw that no one paid attention to him, and could not help but feel a little discouraged. In the past, wherever he went, he was accompanied by the awe and submission of various alien races, but when he came to Earth, he was even worse than a human. "Okay, hurry up and eat. We'll talk about it after you're full." Jane comforted him. Thor did not reply, and began to gnaw on the chicken leg in his hand unhappily. Kale shook his head secretly. Thor now had no divine power at all, and even his physique had become as weak as a mortal. Even if he deliberately revealed his divine power, there was no way to see through his identity. Kale could see that the purple ability card representing the Protoss was still on Thor, but at this time the card did not have any light, and was in a state of invalid seal. Odin could seal a purple quality ability card, or could it only seal the divine power of the Protoss? Kale thought to himself and raised his eyebrows. Compared to the old monsters like Odin or Alpha Centauri, he could clearly see the gap between him and the top powerhouses in the universe. Regarding the card quality, above purple was gold, and above gold was colorless. Every step up was like a heavenly chasm. Kale temporarily compared the purple grade to the planet level. That is to say, having a purple ability card is enough to do whatever you want on a planet. An ability card with a rare purple prefix was already at the top of Earth's current combat power. He, Hulk, and Thor, who had recovered his divine power, were temporarily in this semi-invincible realm. The reason why he was semi-invincible was mainly because there were too few people in this starry sky who had gold or above ability cards. But just because they were few in number didn't mean that they didn't exist. Kale was slowly chewing his food while thinking about something. Suddenly, a strong arm reached out from the side and enthusiastically put it on his shoulder. Thor held a glass in his other hand and downed a large glass of beer. He then smashed the glass on the floor and laughed loudly, "Not bad, another glass." The sound of the cup shattering and the strange cry attracted the attention of the other customers and waiters in the restaurant. The group of people at the corner of the table instantly became the focus of attention. "Well, we'll pay for it," Jane quickly said. Daisy stared at Thor angrily and said in a low voice, "Please, can you stop smashing things? You said you're the son of Odin. So what if you're a god? You can just smash things." "Alright, I'll try to control it." Thor also knew that he had done something wrong and sighed embarrassedly. "Another glass, right? Here, drink it." Kale smiled and pushed a glass of beer that he had not drunk over. "Alright, you're my friend." Thor's eyes lit up slightly. He patted Kale's shoulder hard, raised the glass with one hand, and downed it in one gulp. Daisy and Jane were originally afraid that Thor, a boorish man, would use too much force and hurt Kale. In the end, they were surprised to find that Kale's face was calm. Even his shoulder did not move under Thor's heavy pats. Thor put his hand on Kale's shoulder and suddenly remembered something. He asked, "Right, you just said that this is Earth, right?" Faced with this idiotic question, Daisy rolled her eyes. "Big brother, what's wrong?" "Nothing. If it's Earth, I have an old friend who should be living here." Thor took a deep breath and asked with slight anticipation, "Do you know Kale?" When this question came out, the entire restaurant fell silent again. Then, many people shook their heads and laughed secretly. Daisy face-bombed and said jokingly, "Are you sure? Mr. Kale is your old friend?" "Wait a minute, we're talking about two different people." "What's wrong? Isn't he silver hair? He looks very young and handsome. He has a bit of my demeanor back then." Thor praised himself and pointed to Kale beside him. "He looks a little like him." "Many people say so." Kale smiled faintly when he saw them looking at him. No emotion could be seen from his face. Jane looked away and said to Thor, "If you're talking about a symbol of peace, forget about whether we know him or not, there's probably no one in this world who doesn't know him. A symbol of peace? Then it must be him. He became the guardian of our divine realm as a mortal. He shines wherever he goes. Thor's words just happened to hit the spot in Kale's heart. He felt very happy and secretly lamented that he did not waste time and specially came over. Of course, this was also giving Odin enough face. Thor said happily, "Since you know him, then do you have Kale's contact information? Don't you have a phone number or something? Call him over now, and he said that he will receive me well when he goes to Earth." "Aren't I receiving you right now?" Kale secretly complained. Daisy continued to use her poisonous tongue and spread out her hands. "Everyone, I think we should take him back to the hospital. Not only does he have 8th grade syndrome, but he also has very serious paranoia." Jane nodded in agreement this time. Contact the symbol of peace and call him out? There were probably not many people in this world who could do that. Eric, who returned, happened to hear the conversation and smiled as if he was joking. "Okay, I'll pay for this meal. Treat it as treating Mr. Kale, who is far away in New York. Long live the mentor." Daisy cheered happily. Jane frowned slightly and silently looked at Kale, Thor, and Eric. At this moment, she seemed to understand something, but she was not completely sure. After all, if her guess was true, it would be too shocking. New York, residential rental building. Eddie was sleeping soundly on the bed with saliva hanging from the corner of his mouth. He was dreaming of becoming a popular reporter and marrying a rich and beautiful woman as soon as possible. Suddenly, the room he was in. No, it should be said that the whole building shook violently as if there was an earthquake. All the furniture and lights were shaking left and right. Pa! When the alarm clock at the bedside fell to the ground, Eddie woke up from his dream. He rolled on the bed and stood up, subconsciously looking for slippers to wear. Before he put on his slippers, there was another huge muffled sound and a strong vibration came from the next room again. What's going on next door? Demolition? Eddie panicked. He was only wearing a pair of zebra shorts. He put on his slippers and ran to the door of the room. Chapter 308. Eddie walked to the door of the room, leaned against the door, and put his left eye close to the peephole to look outside. When he saw the situation outside, he sucked in a breath of cold air. His brain, which was still in a daze, was completely awake. A chill ran down his spine, and he could no longer complain. Outside the door, the corridor was filled with dust. The door of the bald man's neighbor's room was broken open, and he could see the dark hall without any light. Inside the hall, there were two tall and strong humanoid shadows fighting each other. In a few moments, the furniture in the hall was overturned, the stone walls collapsed, and the ceiling collapsed. The entire residential building was shaking. The dull and loud sound of violent fighting was accompanied by the screams and cries for help of the surrounding tenants. This was simply a disaster scene. This is first-line news material. His occupational disease was acting up. Eddie murmured, but the shaking was getting louder and louder. He quickly realized that now was not the time to think about the press release. If he lost his life later, he would become the male lead in the news report. Evacuate first to ensure safety. Eddie took a deep breath, summoned his courage, and unlocked the door. He was ready to quickly open the door and take the opportunity to quickly run to the stairs at the end of the corridor. But just as he finished unlocking the door, with a bang, the door of the room shook violently. Eddie quickly retracted his hands. Something crashed into his door. Eddie was shocked and doubtful. With a trace of luck, he put his eyes close to the peephole again. This time, he could not see the situation outside. Instead, he was directly faced with a huge and white pupil. They stared at each other. Although Eddie knew about the anti-theft peephole and could not see inside from the outside, he still shivered as if he had fallen into an icehouse. That was definitely not a human eye. Eddie's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He kept retreating away from the front door of his house. When he retreated to the corner of the hall, the front door burst off from the wall and flew in. Other than the main entrance, there were also two 2-meter-tall humanoid monsters that were exposed under the bright lights, as well as Eddie, the owner of the room. Eddie dared to guarantee that even though he was an experienced and knowledgeable journalist and had watched every episode of Animal World, he had never seen a terrifying creature like the one that had broken into his house. One of the monsters had white pupils, ferocious fangs, and black muscle fibers all over its body were swollen. There were white marks on its chest that resembled burning flames. It was the front face that was completely covered in poison. The other monster had green eyes and dark brown skin. Its muscles were covered with hard lumps, and there were a few rows of barbs on its back. Its fingernails were sharp, and it was one of the 3 symbiotic demons that had descended in New York. Its name was Bai Li. What both of them had in common was that their bodies were filled with a violent and wild aura. Every inch of their muscles was filled with power as if they were born for battle. You are not of the same race from the symbiotic planet. You are an anomaly. Kill him. Bai Li roared hoarsely, one hand grabbing onto Poison's neck as it sprinted towards the room. Poison's hands were tightly gripping onto Bai Li's arms. His feet were deeply embedded in the floor, and the soles of his feet were smoothly plowed backwards. Get out of my way, you behind me. Poison growled. Eddie, who was behind Bai Li, was stunned for a moment before he reacted and moved from the corner to the bathroom on the other side. As soon as Eddie's foot left the bathroom, Poison came to an abrupt halt. It grabbed onto Bai Li's hand, the muscles on its arms bulging as it moved Bai Li away from its neck. It then threw Bai Li over its shoulder and slammed him into the corner of the wall. Boom! The wall in the corner was like a piece of paper, and a hole appeared in the wall. Bai Li's head was buried in a pile of rubble, and only 2 thick legs could be seen. Seeing such an exaggerated level of destruction, Eddie's jaw dropped. The first thought that flashed through his mind was, "It's over. I'm going to have to pay the landlord for the repairs. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and get out of here." Poison rolled its eyes. Its attitude towards Eddie was somewhat of a friendly neighbor. Okay. Eddie nodded like a chick pecking at rice. With his back against the wall, he ran around the pile of rubble that Bai Li was in and towards the door. Before Eddie could take more than a few steps, Bai Li roared and quickly flipped over. Rubble and dust flew everywhere, mixed with a sharp dark brown light. Before Poison could dodge, its body was severely injured. A dark brown giant spear pierced through its chest and through its back. Black liquid spilled onto the floor like fresh blood. Damn it! Poison struggled with a hoarse voice. It reached out and grabbed the handle of the spear in front of it. It wanted to stop the spear, but the end of the spear was in Bai Li's hand. You're finished. Bai Li laughed sinisterly. He charged forward and used the spear to push Poison off the ground. The tip of the spear pierced through the wall beside the door. It's not that easy. Poison found that it was impossible to break free. It let go of the spear and turned from defense to offense. It waved its hands at Bai Li. In the short moment it waved its hands, Poison's arms elongated and turned into black spikes with spiral drill bits. Pfft! Bai Li's laughter stopped abruptly. It looked down and saw that the spikes had pierced through its chest. Dark brown liquid flowed down. You! Bai Li took a step back, trying to pull the spikes away. In the end, the toxin reacted even faster. It connected the tips of the 2 spikes together, and it looked like a chain was used to lock the bones of the host inside Billy. Bai Li had no choice but to hold the spear with both hands. That's more like it. Poison smiled. Shockingly, both sides had suffered great losses and were in a stalemate. You're really something. But my host is obviously much stronger. I'm still the winner. Bai Li sneered and held the spear firmly to prevent Poison from escaping. Poison heard this and pursed its lips. The bodies of both monsters were melting, but Bai Li was obviously faster. Its head had already melted, revealing the face of its host, the bald man. At this moment, a surprised voice came from the side. "Neighbor?" Poison looked sideways and saw that Eddie was still in the room. His back was against the wall and he was watching them from a safe distance of 5 meters. "Are you okay?" Aid asked Dudu nervously. Dudu had kindly reminded him twice, and he hadn't forgotten his life-saving grace. "I'm fine, but something will happen soon." Poison smiled bitterly. Suddenly, an idea came to him and he asked in a hoarse voice, "Do you have gas in your house?" "Yes, why?" Eddie was stunned. "Turn on the switch and let the gas leak in. Quick!" Poison said. Bai Li didn't know what gas was, but his subconscious warned him not to let poison succeed. His face twisted and he warned Eddie, "Boy, I advise you to leave now. Otherwise, when I'm done with the otherworldlings, I'll eat you alive." Eddie was a little hesitant at first, but after hearing Bai Li's words, he shrugged and walked to the kitchen. He sighed and said, "Because of your threat, I'm going to waste my time with you today." Chapter 309. Damned Brat. Seeing that Eddie dared to go against his will, Bai Li was instantly enraged. His green pupils flashed with a cold light as he kicked with all his might, pulling Poison's twin spikes back. He bared his fangs and brandished his claws in an attempt to kill Eddie first. "Just stay here obediently." Poison sneered. Its host could not hold on for much longer. Its body was on the verge of disintegration, and its body was pinned to the wall by Bai Li's spear. The black liquid from its body flowed down to the ground. However, it still used its arm to lock Bai Li tightly, preventing him from breaking free of its 3-meter radius, endangering Eddie's personal safety. The deadlock between the two of them with a force of more than 10 tons shook the entire room. The seemingly sturdy walls and floor were on the verge of collapsing, and dust filled the room. "Bastard! Watch me eat you alive!" Bai Li roared angrily, and a part of the liquid in its body began to flow back, covering Poison's chest along the spear, and gradually began to devour Poison's body. "Hurry up!" Poison shouted hoarsely, but his words were not directed at Bai Li, but towards Eddie's direction. "Understood." Without hesitation, Eddie rushed into the kitchen, pulled out the gas pipe, and closed the window. "Landlord, you can't blame me for this." Eddie sighed helplessly, gritted his teeth, and turned the gas switch on while his head was still hot. In a few seconds, the pungent smell of gas rushed into his nostrils, and after filling the narrow kitchen space, it leaked out through the door and into the hall. Eddie covered his nose and mouth, turned around, and rushed out of the hall. He found that Poison and Bai Li were still wrestling, and their upper bodies had already melted to the point that they could no longer be seen as humans. The dark black liquid and the dark brown liquid were wrapped around the lower body of their respective hosts, and they were floating and moving like snakes entangled together to tear at each other. But obviously, the adult Bai Li had the absolute upper hand, and the dark brown liquid covered 1/5 of Poison's body. "Okay, what do we do next?" Eddie asked worriedly. Poison struggled to resist Bai Li's devouring, and the small head formed by the black liquid said hoarsely, "It's simple. After 10 seconds, ignite." "Oh." Eddie nodded subconsciously, but after figuring out the concept of igniting the gas, his eyes couldn't help but widen. He opened his mouth wide in shock. "You said ignite the gas?" "Yes. If you don't want to die, do it. You heard what it said just now. If it's still alive, you're done for." Toxin replied triumphantly. "You bastard, you schemed against me." Eddie smiled bitterly. On second thought, from the moment he chose to stay and turn on the gas, he was already on the same side as Toxin. "We've already come this far. There's no turning back." Eddie made his choice and did not complain anymore. He found a lighter from the overturned desk drawer. 10 seconds passed quickly, and gas began to fill the entire hall. Hearing the conversation between Poison and Eddie, Billy could roughly guess what the gas was. He screamed in horror, "You weirdo, you want to die with me? Who wants to die with you?" Poison laughed and retorted. "Don't tell me you don't know. Our kind is most afraid of fire and ultrasound," Billy said fearfully. Toxin did not answer. Instead, he urged Eddie to quickly say, "Time's up. Go to the corridor and ignite the gas in the room." "Got it." Eddie covered his mouth and nose with his hand. Under the cover of Toxin, he smoothly passed through the door and arrived at the corridor where the air was still relatively clean. After escaping the danger in the room, Eddie's subconscious told him not to do anything else. He quickly left the corridor and left the nightmarish catastrophe of life. Billy Lee's warning, Toxin's warning, echoed faintly in his ears. Eddie took 2 steps and stopped. He looked at the metal lighter lying on his palm. At this time, Toxin's voice came from the room behind him. "Are you done? Hurry up and ignite. I can't hold on any longer. If I die, then I die. I'm still a virgin." Eddie was incomparably sorrowful. He used the lighter to ignite the flame and threw it into the room behind him. Whoosh, the flaming lighter rotated a few times and swept past Toxin and Billy Lee. Under Billy Lee's desperate scream, the flammable gas in the room instantly reacted. Boom! People on the streets of the residential area looked up in horror. They could clearly see a huge explosion on the 5th floor of the rental building. The shock wave formed by the explosion broke the windows and windows. Billowing flames and thick black smoke billowed out. Inside the room. In just a moment, Billy Lee's body and screams were all drowned in a sea of flames. "It's really over." Eddie watched the flames and the explosion rush towards the door. He did not waste any more energy to escape and closed his eyes. The moment before the explosion enveloped Eddie, a black shadow quickly swept past and attached itself to his body. Then, everything was destroyed in the explosion. 5 minutes later. Fire trucks and police cars arrived late at the scene with sirens blaring. They began rescue operations in the building and pulled up a cordon to disperse the crowd. Half an hour later. 3 low-key black commercial vehicles with sword and shield markings, and a silver Chevrolet marked with a card markings, arrived at the scene of the disaster almost at the same time. The police officers who were still cordoning off the scene seemed to have been notified beforehand and gave the green light. The vehicles stopped in front of the empty building. A glamorous woman with short bright red hair and a group of armed agents quickly got out of the SHELD vehicle. She followed closely behind. A cool girl with short dark green hair and 3 men in suits got out of the exclusive car of the unnatural firm. "Huh? Why didn't you Tong come this time?" Natasha asked in surprise. She is wearing a consistent tight black leather jacket, and her slender and exquisite figure curves are exposed at a glance. She looks very sexy and capable. After sitting in the position of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s deputy director for a long time, she also has a faint majesty and calmness. "What, can't I do it?" Luna snorted with dissatisfaction and crossed her arms. She was wearing a masculine shirt and suit with the exclusive devil card logo of Family Cal. Compared to Natasha's sexiness, she was more unique and stunning. She also had a domineering aura that seeped into her bones. "Nothing, then let's go together." Natasha shrugged and did not talk back to her. She led the way upstairs. The two often bickered when they were together. The main reason was Natasha did not like Luna's willful and casual way of doing things. Luna did not like Natasha's strictness and sexiness. When 2 superior beauties met, there was bound to be a fight. Of course, when 2 beauties with distinct styles walked together, it became a beautiful scene in New York City. Few people knew that they were both black rank members of Family Cal. He had mysteriously disappeared with the two monsters in the explosion. We have issued a tracking order and mobilized the local police force to find Eddie's whereabouts. Natasha and Luna looked at each other. Both of them had a thoughtful expression on their faces. Officer Allen, right? Natasha smiled and said without hesitation, you can take your people and leave the scene on the 5th floor now. You just need to maintain the lockdown of the building. This is not something the police can handle. Just hand over all the files to SHELD. And us, the unnatural firm, Luna chimed in. Okay, I understand. Officer Allen agreed without hesitation. SHELD's ability and authority were even higher than the military in New York. It was normal for them to give orders to the police. Not long after, Officer Allen took a dozen police officers and left the scene in an orderly manner. Only a small team was left to maintain the lockdown of the building. SHELD agents and K2 began to take out all kinds of high-tech equipment from their suitcases. They studied the scene of the explosion in detail and recovered the video data of the fight between the two symbiotic creatures. Natasha looked at Luna, who had her hands in her pocket, and asked, Luna, what do you think? Are you insulting my IQ? Since we know some of the characteristics of the symbiotic creatures from the family master, we can basically draw a conclusion to the battle here in advance. Luna said with certainty, the flame has the ability to completely wipe out the symbiotic creatures. Also, there was a corpse left at the scene. It proves that the battle was decided at the moment of the explosion. One of them died and the other escaped. That's what I thought. Also, the symbiotic creature that escaped was living in Eddie's body. Natasha licked her lips in surprise when she said this. Even the family head probably didn't expect that the symbiotic demons that invaded from outer space would actually engage in internal strife. At the same time, New York City, Hudson River. Splash! A dark and tall humanoid monster sprinted and climbed up the bridge. Finally, it jumped down the river that was 100 meters high. The river that reflected the light of the night immediately became turbulent. 10 seconds later, a young man's head emerged from the shallow water of the river. Then, his shoulders, waist, legs, Eddie gasped for breath. He walked from the shallow water to the shore and collapsed on the cement ground. His whole body was wet and in a sorry state. What happened to me? Just now, I turned into a black monster. Eddie still had a lingering fear. He shivered in the night wind, and his hands kept groping his body, which was only wearing a pair of underpants. He didn't even let go of his little brother. He touched him all over but didn't find anything strange. When Eddie was about to let out a sigh of relief, a black liquid seeped out from his chest. It rotated and turned into a snake. Its head was a miniature version of Toxin's head. You're looking for me? Toxin grinned, revealing a row of uneven teeth. How did you get on my body? Eddie stepped back in fear. But Toxin had already joined with him. When he stepped back, Toxin also retreated. Young man, if it wasn't for me, you would have died in the explosion just now. Toxin sneered. So it was you who saved me. Eddie's emotions calmed down a bit. He quickly reacted and said angrily, it's all because of you. You wanted me to set the gas on fire. Now it's great. My house blew up. I've become a murderer. The one you just killed isn't human. Toxin corrected. Do you think the New York police will believe your nonsense? My life is over, Eddie said dejectedly as he knelt on the ground in despair, giving up on himself. You have some potential to become my new host. Please pull yourself together. Toxin comforted Eddie and said proudly, you saw my strength just now. You and I are one. You are an omnipotent Superman. Why are you afraid of the police? Host? Please let me go. Eddie was even more desperate. Sorry. Toxin grinned and said confidently, "You are now the host's spare tire. Before I find a suitable host, I will live in your body." Chapter 311. Mexico, Old Bridge Town, in the restaurant's own single toilet. After listening to the situation of the two-headed symbiotic demon in New York, Kale nodded gently at Yutong's holographic projection. His handsome and cold face had a hint of deep meaning as he said, "Okay, I got it. What do you need us to do?" Yutong asked softly. Kale thought for a moment and ordered, for the time being, let K2 not look for other symbiotic demons. "First, find the symbiotic demon attached to Eddie. I'm a little interested in that symbiotic demon." "Okay, I'll urge Luna to be more diligent." Yutong smiled slightly and then turned off the holographic communication. The single toilet was silent again. "Master, do you really think there is a symbiotic demon that is not afraid of fire?" Venom said with a complicated mood. "One must know that no matter how it evolved, even when it entered adulthood and developed various combat modes, it still could not get rid of the fatal weakness of fire and ultrasonic waves. Especially the fear of fire, it made Kale unable to rely on the symbiotic demon to carry out the full coverage buff under the fire god's divine power. To a certain extent, its combat power was greatly reduced. And now, there was a symbiotic demon that was suspected to not be afraid of fire. This was simply a blatant mockery for Venom. It hasn't been confirmed yet, it's just a certain probability. Besides, even if it doesn't have the weakness of fire, it can't be compared to you." Kale comforted Venom, which was rare. After so many battles and incidents, Venom and Vice were his left and right shoulders respectively. The two together with Kale could achieve omnipotence in various fields. "Let's take care of things here first, then go back to New York." After Kale finished, he opened the door and left the toilet. Just as he returned to the restaurant, he happened to see Thor leave the table and walk to a few guests at the next table with a straight face. "Thor?" Jane and others stood up in confusion, afraid that he would do something brainless again. "What were you talking about just now, can you tell me?" Thor walked to the next table and asked a bearded man with bare arms. "Of course." The bearded man grinned and gestured with his hands and feet. He said vividly, "About 30 miles south of this town, there's a pothole. There's a small hammer-shaped meteorite that can't be taken out no matter how hard you try. Even a full-powered off-road vehicle can't move it at all. Have we been discovered?" Kale could not help but shake his head when he heard this. 30 miles south, is it? Saul nodded seriously and thanked him before returning to the table where Jane and the others were sitting. The bearded man waved his hand and looked at Thor's back. He kindly reminded him, "Hey, it's too late to go there now. There's a group of suspected armed personnel from the government that has completely sealed off that place." Thor returned to the dining table without a care and nodded at Kale who had returned. He then said to Jane and the others, "I should go. Are you interested in that small meteorite?" Jane asked with a frown. "That's not a meteorite, it's Mjolnir, Thor's hammer." Thor was obviously very excited and spoke a little faster, so much so that the pronunciation of Mjolnir was a little strange. Daisy was confused. She tilted her head cutely and asked, "Meow meow? What's meow meow?" "It's Mjolnir, a hammer," Thor repeated. "Oh, Mjolnir hammer." Daisy suddenly understood. Kale was speechless. Odin would cry if he called Thor's hammer, which controlled thunder and power, Mjolnir hammer. "I'll remember you. When I get Mjolnir back, I'll definitely come back to thank you." Thor said this and left the dining room without looking back. "Should we stop him?" Daisy shrugged and looked at the others. Eric asked straightforwardly, "Can you stop him?" "That's true." Daisy didn't feel sorry for Thor's departure at all. After all, she wasn't interested in astronomical research. Her slightly hot eyes kept lingering on Kale. Kale didn't care. He continued to enjoy the food calmly as if he didn't see it. He was thinking about other things silently. If Thor could retrieve Thor's hammer so easily, he wouldn't have wasted his time coming out of New York. Since this was Odin's special experience in the mortal world, it should look like an experience. How could it be called an experience without some pain and torture? It was more appropriate to call it a day trip to Earth. After we finish eating, we can follow and take a look. Kale pondered for a moment and gave a simple opinion. I have no objections. Eric was the first to agree. Me too. Daisy agreed. After Mr. Card said that, you guys changed too quickly. Jane was speechless. However, she was thinking about Thor's matter and identity, so she had no reason to reject Kale's suggestion. She could only agree. When the group finished eating, it was almost noon. Jane and the others returned to the place where they stayed and parked. They were surprised to find a group of people in suits rummaging through their caravan and room. They took out laptops, equipment, and other items and were about to take them away. People from SHELD. As expected, the location of Thor's hammer was blocked by them. Kale recognized the identity of the people in suits at a glance. He put his hands in his pockets and walked behind the group. He didn't want to expose his identity. What are you doing? Stop. That's our stuff. You're infringing on our personal property. Robbers. Jane jumped on the spot and rushed forward, but was stopped by a few men in suits who grabbed her arms. Hey hey. Daisy saw that her friend was stopped and wanted to go over to help. Eric hurriedly pulled her back and asked the people in suits with a serious expression, Gentlemen, can you explain the current situation? We're astronomers. We haven't done anything illegal. Let me explain. Agents, let go of this young lady first. A calm and steady voice sounded. Two people in suits immediately let go of Jane's arms and stepped back to make way. A middle-aged man in a suit walked out from behind and took out a work ID with a sword and shield symbol. He said to Jane in a gentle and friendly manner, You must be Miss Foster. I'm Agent Coulson from SHELD. Due to some situations, I need to access your records and astronomical observation data. This is your compensation. Coulson said as he took out a bank check for $100,000 and handed it to Jane. Jane couldn't accept it and said angrily, Aren't you being too forceful and overbearing? And some of my equipment is custom made. You can't buy it at all. I'm sorry. Coulson had a smile on his face, but he wouldn't change his decision. SHELD's authority was focused and powerful. In order to work efficiently, they could do many things that even the military wouldn't dare to do casually. Normal legal cases were ineffective against them. Jane watched as her notebook and equipment were carried into SHELD's car. She was unwilling to give up and wanted to snatch it back. The experienced Eric quickly walked up and pulled Jane back after he steadied Daisy. Jane, don't mess with them. Eric's face was unprecedentedly serious. He said nervously in a low voice, They're from SHELD. We can't afford to offend them. What department is SHELD? Daisy came over and asked gloomily. Eric sighed and said, It's a secret department behind the country. I used to have a professor friend who studied gamma radiation. After SHELD came to his door, he never appeared again. That exaggerated? Jane and Daisy gasped. They were both shocked. Chapter 312. That's right, it's that exaggerated. Eric spread his hands helplessly. For ordinary people, the intelligence agencies with the backing of the state had authority that they could not afford to offend, and those intelligence agencies were the hired thugs of SHELD. With the function of SHELD, they could mobilize the local police and military forces at will, and direct any local government department to coordinate actions. Jane and Daisy were surprised and doubtful, and from the corner of their eyes, they saw Coulson, who was not far away, suddenly walk toward Cale, who was standing alone. Daisy exclaimed and wanted to pull Cale back. "Daisy, wait a minute." Eric hurriedly grabbed her, and also watched the two meet. He said calmly, "It's okay. If it's him, things may turn around." Jane narrowed her eyes after hearing this and looked at Cale with slight expectation. This time, she could also verify the guess in her heart. "Hello, sir." Coulson walked to Cale and took the initiative to reach out his hand in a friendly manner. He looked at his face and said in confusion, "I always feel that you're a little familiar, as if I've seen you somewhere before." "Probably." Cale nodded calmly and shook hands with Coulson. In just a moment, Coulson's face changed slightly, and he awkwardly withdrew his palm with dents. "If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I have something to do with a few friends." Cale gestured in the direction of Jane and the others, and then left without paying attention to him. "Take care." Coulson exhaled and said calmly. After Cale and the others left, Coulson still stood motionless, frowning and thinking about something. "Sir, what's wrong? Is there a problem with that Mr. Card just now?" Two agents came forward and asked in confusion. "Card?" Coulson suddenly opened his eyes wide, and his emotions were difficult to calm down. He hurriedly asked, "That person just now was called Mr. Card?" "Yes. I just found it. There are relevant files and information in the headquarters." The agent replied. "It really is him. He actually appeared here." "All right, everything is fine now." Coulson patted his chest. He was also suspicious just now, but it was not until now that he completely confirmed Cale's identity. "Sir, who is that?" The two new agents obviously did not understand the meaning of the alias Card. "If I tell you, I'll probably scare you, so I'll keep it to myself. Hurry up and pack your things and drive away from here." Coulson sighed and looked at the red mark on his palm, feeling depressed that he had asked for a snub. God had not left New York City for half a year, but now he was traveling the human world. Coulson sighed in his heart. He took out his mobile phone and found Director Frey's contact number. No matter what, this matter had to be reported to the chief. Ever since the internal strife at SHELD half a year ago, the old agents in the bureau would tremble whenever they saw a statue that symbolized peace. The bloody scene of the massacre at the headquarters of SHELD was still fresh in their minds. There were indeed many departments and people under SHELD, but they were always under one person. This fact was believed to be deeply etched in the minds of many agents. Meeting with Coulson, the attitude of meeting a stranger, made Jane's speculation about Cale's identity fade a lot. This was a good thing. After all, Cale did not want to expose his true identity too early. It was very convenient and simple to blend in with the small scientific research team of ordinary people and secretly help Thor. If Thor knew that he was here, he would probably complain about why he did not help him return to the divine realm. Cale did not want to get involved in his own family's drama in the divine realm. Cale followed Jane and the others back to the station wagon. Jane drove the car out of town and prepared to go to the place where the meteorite fell. Before the car left town, they met Thor, who wanted to buy a warhorse from the shop assistant at a pet shop on the side of the road. Thor was probably used to flying. After losing his divine power and Thor's hammer, it would probably take him a day to walk 30 miles with the body of a mortal. So, after careful consideration, he wanted to find a warhorse to ride. This prince from the divine realm, after being ruthlessly mocked by Daisy again, finally sat in the back of the station wagon. Facing the afternoon sun, the station wagon drove out of town, stirring up a cloud of dust in the wilderness, heading straight to the destination 30 miles south. When they approached the meteorite crater, the sun had already sunk below the horizon, the light and temperature were all reduced, and night shrouded the cold and uninhabited wilderness. The station wagon, like a lonely traveler, turned on the headlights and continued to move forward. Two faint beams of light cut through the night. When they were about half a mile away from the destination, Cale, who was in the passenger seat, suggested that everyone get out of the car and walk the rest of the way instead of driving. Before the group understood the intention, Thor had already opened the door and got out of the back of the car. He walked to the small slope and looked into the distance. They could see a circle of light like a small city, faintly covering the sky above the meteorite crater. Brother Ka is right. This piece of metal called a car is too conspicuous. We can only walk the rest of the way, Saul said. He couldn't help but move. His feet sped up as he moved towards the light source. Cale followed in silence. Seeing this, the others could only bite the bullet and continue to move forward. 10 minutes later, the group arrived near the crater, lowered their bodies, and lay on the edge of the slope to look down. They saw that with the meteorite crater as the center, a large modern research base had been built on the spot. The third floor of the building was brightly lit, and there were figures of staff conducting investigation work inside. A protective wire fence marked with high-voltage electricity was set up around the research base. Many armed personnel patrolled the area, and even more supplies were being transported in large cars and planes. Eric lowered his voice and said, "They built a temporary fortress in less than half a day. This must be SHELD's great work. If it's just a meteorite, why didn't they take it? Why did they have to build a city here?" Jane asked in confusion. "Yes, it's superfluous." Daisy agreed with him. "It's simple. Because they can't take it. You guys stay here. I'll go take back what belongs to me." Thor could not hold back anymore. He walked out on his own and rushed toward the protective wire fence under the cover of the night. "That bastard, doesn't he know he'll drag us down with him?" "Carl, what should we do now?" Daisy said in annoyance. She turned around and was shocked to find that Cale, who had been following behind the group, had disappeared without a trace. "Where's Mr. Carl?" Jane also noticed. "Probably, he went with him." Eric smiled bitterly and pointed at Thor's back. At the same time, SHELD, temporary research base, inside the research base. In the middle of the research base, the silver hammer had not been moved. It was placed in the middle of the meteorite crater. Researchers in white went in and out, holding measuring instruments beside the hammer to collect data. Coulson presided over the overall situation. He stood in the control room on the second floor of the temporary research base and looked down at a series of detailed work around the hammer. Suddenly, as if an enemy had invaded, the alarm of the temporary base rang loudly and urgently through the night sky. Enemy attack. Chapter 313. Lightning flashed in the wilderness, dark clouds covered the night sky, and as the cold wind blew, heavy rain suddenly fell. The alarm in the temporary base sounded, and the armed personnel stationed there moved. Coulson frowned, took out his communicator and dialed, connected to the monitoring room, and asked in a deep voice, "What happened?" The person in charge on the other side of the communicator immediately replied, "Sir. We just found out that the defensive net in the south of the base has not been electrified yet, and there is a hole in the corner." A strong blond man with a height of 1.8 meters forced his way into the temporary base, and even knocked out 2 guards on duty. He is heading to the research room in the center of the base. Coulson's face was calm, and he said coldly, "Got it, let the guards continue to maintain the patrol order, and let the SHELD agents deal with the intruder." "Yes, sir." After hanging up, Coulson continued to dial a private personal line, and soon an indifferent and magnetic male voice answered, "I'm here. The items in this temporary research room are very important. It's better if you take care of it." Coulson informed. "Okay." On the other side of the communicator. In the warehouse on the first floor of the temporary base, a black-haired agent in an agent uniform opened the door of the armory, and his hawk-like cold eyes lingered on the row of iron shelves that displayed various types of firearms. The black-haired agent picked up a modern sniper rifle, weighed it in his hand, and quickly put it back. Without hesitation, he took the special composite bow on the top row, and a quiver filled with many strange arrows. Then, he quickly rushed out of the armory, and went up the stairs. When he reached the roof of the third floor, he reached out and climbed up to the temporary rooftop of the base. At this moment, in the research room, Thor ran down the corridor, panting. When he was about to reach the corner, a burly black agent with a bear-like physique blocked his way. "Mortal, don't block my way." Thor heard the thunder outside, looked at the burly agent who was half a head taller than him, and clenched his fists tightly as he threatened. The divine dominion had changed, and he did not want to waste any more time here. "If you want to go, then beat me to the ground." The black agent sneered, and clenched his sandbag-sized fists, making cracking sounds. There was no point in talking, just do it. Thor let out a low growl and rushed forward like a brute. He then wrestled with the black agent at close range with his bare hands. After a while, the two of them were entangled in a fight. They broke through the wall of the temporary research institute and fell into the open-air crater. Due to the heavy rain, the crater had become a bumpy quagmire. Two tall and strong men fell into it and were instantly covered in mud. They threw punches and kicks at each other without caring about anything else. For a moment, it was hard to tell who had the upper hand. The scene was clearly seen by Coulson on the second floor and the black-haired agent who had climbed to the top of the dome. The black-haired agent stood alone on the narrow rooftop. He took out a special steel arrow and knocked it on the string of a special composite bow. He aimed down with one eye and drew a crescent moon arc, aiming at the back of Thor's head in the hole. No matter how close Thor and the black agent were, and how they kept changing their positions during the fight, the sharp and cold tip of the arrow always followed the target and adjusted its position. "I'm in position. Do you want me to kill the intruder?" The black-haired agent asked expressionlessly. Hearing the voice from the communicator, Coulson pondered for a moment. Seeing that the intruder was about to beat the black agent to the ground, he finally nodded and gave the order, "Kill." "Understood." The black-haired agent's eyes were deep. He held his breath and was not affected by the heavy rain. His hands holding the bow were as steady as a machine. Below the hole, Thor knocked the black agent to the ground with a punch. He shook his wet hair and walked tiredly toward the silver hammer in the center of the hole. He did not notice the fatal danger coming from the side of his head. "It's over," the black-haired agent muttered in a low voice. Just as he was about to release the arrow and let the special arrowhead shoot Thor's head, a hand was placed on the tip of the arrow from behind without any warning and lowered down to shift the target. Who is it?" The black-haired agent trembled and turned his head in shock. He did not know when, but a young and handsome silver-haired man was standing behind him. "Using a special bow. You should be the Hawkeye, Clint Barton that Natasha often mentioned, right?" Kale smiled and looked down at Thor in the crater. He said in a calm and dignified tone, "The one down there is my friend. Do me a favor and don't shoot him." "Who the hell are you?" Hawkeye was still in a state of extreme shock. As a shooting expert, what he feared the most was having the enemy get close to him, especially when he was defenseless. But just now, from the moment the intruder appeared to the moment he tried to stop him, even with his high vigilance and sensitivity, he could not detect the slightest trace of abnormality. The intruder seemed to have appeared out of thin air. If it was really an enemy, he would have died countless times just now. Kale did not answer. If he could not even guess the intruder's identity, it would be a disgrace to the hero code name Hawkeye. "You just mentioned Natasha, silver-haired, too young." Hawkeye was stunned for half a second, then he reacted and took back his bow. He clenched his fist and bowed, and said in awe, "Mr. Kale. You have a good eye." Kale nodded and asked him to be quiet. He continued to look down at the situation in the crater. Is that person also here? Coulson was slightly stunned when he vaguely heard the conversation on the other side of the communicator. Then his face became serious, and his puzzled eyes also fell on Thor in the crater. For him. In the crater washed by the heavy rain. The mud on Thor's body was gradually washed away. He breathed calmly and walked to the side of the silver hammer and stopped. With joy on his face, he lowered his body and held the handle of the hammer with his habitual right hand, trying to lift it high as usual. But no matter how hard he tried, the hammer did not move. Thor's smile froze on his face, and the air was full of awkward atmosphere. He did not give up and used his hands, exerting all his strength, but the fact that he could not lift the hammer did not change. Thor let go of his hands. At this moment, he suddenly understood his situation. His father Odin exiled him, and Thor's hammer no longer recognized him. All his strength, divine power, honor, and pride no longer existed. He was even worse than a mortal. Bang! Thor knelt on the mud beside the hammer and looked up at the night sky, like a wounded beast, making a heart-wrenching roar in the heavy rain. Sure enough. Kale, who had already known the outcome, was not surprised. He patted Hawkeye on the shoulder and said, "Knock him out with anesthetic and lock him up. After that, an astronomer will come to pick him up and let him go." Good. Hawkeye did not understand Kale's intention, but he instinctively obeyed the order. From the moment Kale appeared here, the highest authority was transferred from Coulson. Chapter 314. It was 1:00 in the morning in downtown New York. Most of the buildings were closed, and only the 24-hour stores were still a little bit crowded. The neon lights on the streets gave off a dim yellow light, and some empty taxis shuttled through the main road from time to time. A young man wearing jeans and a hooded windbreaker had his hands in his trouser pockets. He was slightly bent over, his head was lowered, and his face was buried in the shadow of the hat. He was wandering around the deserted street like a homeless man. Eddie. His current situation was similar to Thor in Mexico. Thor. As a top student who had just graduated from the University of California, he had just reported to the news company in New York for 2 days. He had been dreaming about getting promoted, getting married, and reaching the pinnacle of his life. But in the end, overnight, not only did he blow up the room he rented, but he also became a murder suspect and was arrested by the New York police. Most importantly, there was a symbiotic life inside his body that didn't care if he lived or died. F***ck, I'm so unlucky today. Eddie cursed in a low voice. His mind suddenly buzzed, and then, like a voice in his heart, he retorted in a hoarse voice, Hey, how can you say that? Become my host, this is the day you'll be reborn. Huh. Eddie forced a smile. Toxin said unhappily, cheer up. Aren't there many examples of ordinary people becoming supermen in New York? For example, Captain America, the symbol of peace. Do you think, with our transformations, we're more like heroes or villains? Eddie was speechless. Although that's the case. But what you're going to do next is to save New York and world peace. Toxin coughed softly and explained seriously, in the battle just now, I swallowed part of the symbiotic life form's body and got its memory fragments. They came to Earth this time to inspect this place in advance and develop it into an alien colony. If one of them returns to their original planet, it will bring thousands of symbiotic life forms to attack Earth. Isn't that monster already dead? Eddie asked in surprise. Toxin said straightforwardly, yes. But there were 4 of them. Now that one is dead, there are 3 left. To deal with such a powerful monster, and 3 of them? You might as well ask me to kill myself. Eddie howled in pain. He stopped in the aisle and scratched his hair irritably, which startled a stray dog on the side of the road. The stray dog glared at him angrily, baring its teeth and drooling disgusting saliva. Its eyes flashed with a green cold light in the night. F***ck off. Don't mess with me. Eddie glared back angrily. Under the dim neon lights, the face hidden under the hood was slightly distorted into the face of a black monster. Its long and narrow protruding white eyes were surging with ferocity and murderous intent. Its bloody mouth was wide enough to bite off a human head, and it had a mouthful of many sharp and ferocious fangs. Awoo! The vicious dog was scared in seconds with its tail between its legs. It fled in panic with its limbs unstable. Soon, it disappeared at the intersection. Eddie's face returned to its original appearance. He sighed helplessly and continued to walk forward aimlessly. They have very obvious weaknesses, namely fire and ultrasonic waves. As long as we make good use of this, it's not impossible to kill the 3 symbiotic demons. As a reporter, Eddie caught the flaw in his thinking. He asked, "Wait. Aren't you the same as them? Why do you want to help Earth? This is too fake." Toxin was silent. After a while, Toxin said coldly, "To be honest, Earth doesn't matter to me. What happens to Earth has nothing to do with me. I just want to find the meaning of my existence. Although we are of the same race as the symbiotic demons, we were born on different planets. So you're not in the same group? Then you're looking for your parents now?" Eddie said. Even he felt it was a bit strange. Alien version of a tadpole looking for its mother? This question seemed to have touched Toxin's sore spot. It said in annoyance, "I don't know. Don't ask me. If you ask me again, I'll bite your head off." Eddie shrugged and said, "You can't bite me even if I let you. Also, I'm your host now. We share the same life. If I die, you can't live either." Toxin was speechless. It didn't think that not only was its adaptability strong, but Eddie's human adaptability was also not to be underestimated. Eddie was about to say something when a black tentacle suddenly stretched out from behind him. It stretched out into the side alley and pulled his whole body into it. "What's wrong?" Eddie was surprised. A few seconds later, he saw a police car with its siren blaring slowly drive across the road. It seemed to be patrolling and searching for something. Police car. The police are still looking for me? Eddie was terrified. He asked Toxin in a panic, "What should we do? Before we can find the symbiotic demons, the New York police will kill us first. What are you afraid of?" "I'm here." Toxin snorted in disdain. The host's physical fitness was not bad, but his mentality was too unstable. He still needed to be properly trained. "Don't tell me you want to kill people." Eddie didn't know how many times this had happened. He sighed again and turned to walk out of the alley. However, a black shadow flashed in front of him and 3 people in black appeared at the entrance of the alley. "Be careful. They're not normal people." Toxin's voice rang in Eddie's mind. Eddie took a step back and looked at the 3 people blocking his way cautiously. There were 2 men and a woman. The men were tall and burly, while the woman was slim. They all wore a full set of black combat leather and wore a grinning devil mask. Their equipment was also very strange. One of them carried a Barrett sniper rifle that was as tall as a person. Another had a cold weapon tied to their waist. Another had a pair of huge metal guns with barrels tied to their legs. "Team F, we found the target. He's beside the alley at 654 Hatta Street." As the leader of the 3, a man quickly spoke into the high-tech tactical communications watch. The woman in black looked at Eddie and said in a sweet voice, "Let me introduce ourselves first. We're family Cal's K2. I'm Crimson 11. Crimson 10. Crimson 9. The other 2 K2 spoke separately. "Little brother, I advise you not to put up a pointless struggle." Crimson 11 continued. Eddie didn't answer. He seemed to be talking to himself. "What should I do? What else can we do? Do it. As if following Toxin's violent response, Eddie growled slightly. His body quickly changed and expanded. A dark cuticle appeared. Armed explosive muscles and a terrifying shell covered his original human body. Go! Faced with this situation, the three K2 looked at each other. They didn't say anything and joined forces to attack. Their reaction was fast, efficient, and useful. A fierce battle unfolded in the quiet streets of New York City in the dead of night. Chapter 3:15. Sigh, I can't believe Team F ran into them. They got lucky. I wanted to see how powerful the symbiotic extraterrestrial entity that Family Master is interested in is. Once Crimson 9 and the others make a move, we won't have a chance. After receiving the message of Team F's encounter, teams of carts wearing black leather jackets and devil masks appeared from time to time in some dark corners or rooftops in New York City. After feeling sorry for them, they quickly rushed to the street where their target was. In less than 10 minutes, almost 4 teams of carts arrived at the scene where the message was sent. After greeting each other, they looked around the quiet street in the middle of the night with vigilance. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Shouldn't there be a battle between transcendents going on? Why was there no one in sight? It was so eerily silent. Did Crimson 9 and the others get rid of the target so quickly? Carts Hong 18 said in surprise. Over there. I detected signs of life, another Carts who was wearing a detection device said as he pointed at a dark alley. Swoosh. Swoosh. A few carts flashed and moved 10 meters away. They arrived at the entrance of the alley in an instant. They followed the dim yellow light and looked inside. The scene in front of them made their pupils shrink and they all gasp in unison. The solid walls on both sides of the narrow alley between 2 buildings had completely collapsed. The cement floor was full of bumpy giant footprints. Traces of guns, swords, and fists were everywhere. It was as if this place had been baptized by an inhuman battle. Crimson 9, the leader of Family Cal Team F, was covered in wounds and blood. He was lying in a 2-meter deep hole in the middle of the alley with his arms and legs spread out. His high-quality alloy sword was bent and broken. One of them was stuck in the hole. Crimson 10, on the other hand, was submerged in a pile of rubble and broken tiles. One of his hands, which had already been crushed, reached out from the pile of rubble and drooped down weakly. The Barrett sniper rifle beside him had already been crumpled into a pile of scrap metal. The only female in Team F, Crimson 11, was wearing a tattered black leather jacket that revealed her fair skin. Her slender body was stuck in the outer wall of the 3rd floor of the building. Her devil mask was long gone, and the light in her beautiful eyes was gone. She looked like she had been broken. This was simply an unbearable sight to behold. The 3 trainers quickly stepped forward without hesitation and gathered the trainers of Team F together. After checking them one by one, Crimson 5, who was the leader of Team B, let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, they're only seriously injured and have lost their ability to fight. There's no danger to their lives. Crimson 15 said incredulously, "It's only been 8 minutes since Team F's call was sent to us and we've arrived here." In such a short period of time, the 3 members of Team F were severely injured and on the verge of death? No. Crimson 5's face was solemn as he judged, if it wasn't for Crimson 9 and the others, ordinary soldiers would have died a long time ago. The group of Ka-2 apprentices fell into silence. They couldn't be more shocked. They used to be at the forefront of human evolution on Earth. Whether it was mutation or technology, they were far behind others. This was also the reason why Ka-2 could rule the underground world of Earth for more than 10 years. In previous missions, whether it was the Mafia, the Assassin Organization, or the National Organization, they were all crushed by Ka-2's day. But tonight, there was only one enemy. The 3 trainers couldn't even hold on for 10 minutes, one of the trainers said, "This is too exaggerated." What kind of monster did they encounter? Not only him, but all the trainers on the field had the same question. Of course, Kale was very willing to see Katu's collective defeat. Living on Earth in peaceful times for a long time, people would become more and more conservative. Before the alien invasion war came, he wanted to let Katu know that there was always someone better than them. It was also a real practice to deal with the alien invasion. On the other side. On the street next to where the battle took place, on the rooftop of a tall building. Under the cover of the cold night, a humanoid dark monster was repeatedly sprinting and jumping. It used the dozens of meters tall skyscrapers as stepping stones to escape in the air. It was obviously injured. Along the way, it spilled drops of dark liquid. Toxin asked with a hoarse voice, "Why didn't you kill those 3 people? They can hurt me. Such a strong enemy should be given respect and bite off their heads. Didn't you see it clearly? They are from the unnatural firm. Compared to them, you and I are the complete villains. How many times do I have to tell you to understand this?" Eddie replied in a bad mood. Toxin said proudly, "Then why should we run? With their strength, even if a few more of them came, they wouldn't be able to compete with me." "What if the symbol of peace came?" Eddie asked. The symbol of peace. Toxin's voice became weak when he heard this name. As long as one came to New York City, everyone knew that there was an undefeated legendary hero here. Although they believed in their own strength, the legend of the symbol of peace was too frightening. The people preached and defended it as if it was a human god. Toxin paused and said stubbornly, "If we can't beat them, we can just run." TSK, Eddie didn't say anything. He sprinted on the rooftop of a tall building and was about to jump to the building across the street. He jumped out of the building and reached the highest point. He was 50 meters in the air. Eddie's face changed drastically. A strong gravitational force pulled him down to the ground. What is this? Toxin was also caught off guard. The humanoid monster in the symbiotic state fell straight down. "We are going to hit the ground. Do something!" Eddie shouted in fear. His limbs swayed freely in the strong wind that was blowing upwards. In his field of vision, the road below was getting closer and closer. 50 meters, 40 meters, 30 meters, it's not that simple. Toxin sneered when he saw that he was about to hit the ground. He controlled his body and waved his hand forward. His dark arm stretched out like rubber and grabbed the edge of the window on the 10th floor of the building in front of him. Gotcha! He pulled down the window frame and kicked the wall of the 7th floor like a swing. His strong arm stabbed into the wall to slow down the speed of his fall. Gotcha! He plowed down the outer wall of the building that was more than 10 meters tall. Eddie violently stomped on the wall of the building and bent the metal lamp post by the side of the road with his palm. He landed in the middle of the empty road without any damage. Who's behind this? Eddie glanced around. His voice was hoarse, domineering and indifferent. It's not that easy to deal with. A woman's voice came from behind a tree on the side of the road. A beautiful green-haired girl in a man's shirt and suit walked out with elegant steps. Her pale hands were covered in green mist and her gem-like eyes were filled with joy. She finally found an opponent who could amuse her while her boss was away. Chapter 316. It was 3:00 in the morning, on a deserted road in New York. Eddie, who was covered in toxin, and Luna, who was using her force field, were facing each other across the wide road. If it was based on physical appearance, there was no doubt that the ferocious, burly, and ugly Eddie had the upper hand. But at this moment, Luna, a young and beautiful Western girl, was not inferior to him in terms of presence. Be careful, Eddie. This human girl is not an ordinary person. Toxin warned in Eddie's mind. Eddie shrugged and said in a low voice, that's what you said about the 3 K2s just now. It's different. Toxin's tone was unprecedentedly serious. Its hoarse and cold words echoed in Eddie's mind and heart. The woman who came this time is much stronger than those humans who called themselves K2s. How strong? Is she stronger than the symbiotic demon called Bailey? Eddie's body was tense and motionless. Luna's delicate figure was reflected in his omniscient eye. In his mind, Bailey was already the strongest inhuman opponent. It's hard to say. Based on my feeling, her combat power is only higher than the symbiotic demon. Toxin did not exaggerate or belittle itself this time. It analyzed objectively based on its perception. It shared a human body with Eddie. Unlike the previous hosts, it did not forcefully seize control of the body. Instead, it gave control of the body back to Eddie. After all, the host and the parasite did not reject each other. Only then could the symbiotic demon unleash its true power. All right, then I know what to do. Leave it to me. Eddie nodded as he clenched his fist and stared at Luna, who was in front of him. What do you know? Toxin was a little confused. It originally wanted to add some words of comfort and guidance. But now it seemed that this host had the potential to be trained into a strong person. Are you ready to go? Luna also secretly raised both of her hands. The light effect on her palms pulsated slightly. She was ready to fight with her mutant ability at any time. Of course, it's a battle plan. Run. Before she could finish her sentence, Eddie suddenly turned around and stomped on the ground with its back facing Luna. The cement ground immediately cracked and left a hole. Its slightly bloated dark body quickly ran past the greenery on the road and fled to the other side of the road without looking back. This dramatic turn of events not only stunned Luna, who was ready to fight, but even Toxin, who was one with Eddie, felt its face was burning. Why are you running with my transformation? Toxin's mentality was exploding. Didn't you said to run if you can't beat it? Eddie answered as if it was a matter of course. His legs were running at lightning speed, and he did not show any signs of hesitation. We haven't even started yet. Poison was speechless. This was the first time he had seen such a cowardly host. SSSSSSSS. SSSSSSS is a S, so be it. Toxin silently acquiesced and did not resist in his heart. His cowardly nature seemed to have been exposed openly by Eddie. Eddie had just fled 100 meters away when his ears twitched. He heard the sound of wind breaking behind him. His reflexes made a quick judgment. He lowered his head slightly and shifted his body half a step to the left. Just as he did this, the metal pole of the street lamp missed and brushed past Eddie's shoulder. It was like an extended spear that was nailed into the ground 3 meters away. The strong penetrating force caused the pointless metal pole to sink halfway into the ground. The end of the pole was still vibrating slightly. If it hits, I'm afraid someone will die. Eddie swallowed his saliva and was about to go around the metal pole to continue his escape. However, at the next moment, Luna's figure descended from the sky. The end of the metal pole was bent into a circle, allowing Luna to stand on it with one foot. The green mist on her hands shone brightly as she looked down at the repulsive Eddie. Eddie smiled bitterly and asked in a low voice, Toxin, can we fly? You think too much. Get ready to fight. Toxin mercilessly interrupted Eddie's thoughts of continuing his escape. Luna looked at Eddie and said coldly, when I first saw you, I mistook you for the family master. I didn't expect you to be an alien disguised as the family master. Toxin's and Venom's appearances were too similar. The only difference was the lines on the surface of the body and the color of the eyes on the face. Family master? Eddie's hands shook and his tongue swayed. He explained with a hoarse voice, I think you've misunderstood. I'm actually a good person. Good person? Weren't you the one who detonated the gas and blew up a residential building tonight? Luna's beautiful eyes were cold. Well. Eddie awkwardly scratched his head. Weren't you the one who injured K2? Luna continued to ask. Well, Eddie was sweating profusely. He couldn't finish a complete sentence. He had done too many evil things with Toxin. This time he couldn't clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. I told you not to dream about being a hero. It's good to be a villain. Toxin comforted in a low voice. I'm a good young man in society. Why would I be a villain? Eddie still wanted to argue with Toxin, but Luna obviously wouldn't give him the chance. Her hands seemed to rotate according to some kind of trajectory. Her ability was displayed in reality along with the surging of the green mist. Magnetic field control. The nearest metal object on the road was the lampposts on the side of the road. With Luna as the center, 3 lampposts within 20 meters buzzed and vibrated. They were forcefully pulled out from the ground by force and flew towards Eddie with electric wires that were radiating in all directions. Toxin was in a state of alert. A black tentacle jumped out and stuck to the ground 10 meters away. It pulled Eddie away from the attacking metal poles. Luna flipped her hands and controlled the 3 streetlight poles to adjust their positions in the air. A lamppost plunged into the ground from top to bottom, just in time to cut off the black tentacles that were dragging Eddie. Eddie fell to the ground and rolled a few times. The second lamppost blocked his escape route, forcing his body to stop between the 2 lampposts. Then, the 3rd streetlight pole shot towards Eddie's chest like a homing missile. Stop right there. Eddie growled and blocked in front of his body like a shield. He grabbed the front end of the metal pole in time and stopped it about 3 centimeters in front of his chest. It's over. Luna waved her hand slightly, and a lamp post pierced through the air under the cover of darkness. Like a black flowing light, it went straight for Eddie's defenseless neck. She controlled 4 streetlight poles, but 3 of them were in the light and 1 was hidden in the dark. Attacking at the same time was the key to victory. Eddie held the 3rd metal pole with both hands. He watched the last one approaching him. At the critical moment, he suddenly opened his mouth. Crack! Eddie bit the metal pole with his broken teeth. Under the force, even the iron was as fragile as tofu. Luna was shocked. She had never seen such hard teeth. Now it's my turn. Eddie spat out the iron slag and roared like a monster. He stepped forward with the metal pole in his hand. It was completely different from his previous cowardice. Knowing that he couldn't escape, he decided to fight back. Chapter 317. If he didn't explode in silence, he would die in silence. Fight. With this thought, Eddie's body and mind completely turned into a monster. He angrily held the metal pole of the street lamp and launched a violent counterattack. Under the buff of the toxin, his muscle strength, nerve speed, and explosive jumping ability all increased by dozens of times. In terms of physique, he was only inferior to the strongest creature on land, Hulk. In just a split second, Eddie stomped on the ground all the way. His tall and burly dark body whistled as he approached Luna, who was much smaller in size than him. What a pity. Luna sighed, looking at the approaching Eddie. Her hands nimbly rotated, the green fog smoothing out the turbulent air waves in the air. She didn't feel pity for herself, but for Eddie. Relying on the advantage of an extraordinary body to close the distance and counterattack, this was naturally the correct choice in battle, but why did he mindlessly choose the metal pole as his weapon, one had to know. Wanting to use metal to hurt an ability user with magnetic field control, this was simply the delusion of an ignorant person. Luna didn't move to dodge, and calmly used her ability. When Eddie was only 5 meters away from her, the metal pole suddenly bent in the opposite direction, as if it had turned into a living iron snake. The end of the metal pole wrapped around Eddie's arm, and the end bent down, changing shape and coiling around his waist and knees. This is... Eddie and the toxin were shocked, and a few subtle sounds of wind breaking came from behind them again. Crack, 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 crack. 4 metal poles of street lamps fell from the sky, more than half of them inserted into the hard concrete ground, forming a narrow square prison on the ground, surrounding the symbiotic Eddie, who was bound by the metal poles as a rope. Now, it's truly over. Luna's tone was cold, and didn't give Eddie a chance to react. She jumped off the metal pole she had been stepping on, using her ability to pull it out of the ground, and waved it at the 4 metal poles. Clang! The 4 metal poles that formed the temporary prison hummed and vibrated under the sudden impact, and together with the ear-piercing and dull noise. It's over. Eddie's eyes were filled with fear. He didn't expect that the other party would even know that symbiotic organisms were afraid of ultrasound. The corners of Luna's mouth curved into a wonderful arc, but after 3 seconds, her smile faded and was replaced by a dignified and serious expression. It was the sound of several metal rods vibrating. Even she was a little impatient, but Eddie, who was facing the sound waves inside the cage, was still standing in the same place, unharmed. You're okay? Eddie was also a little confused as he asked Poison happily. I forgot to tell you. I'm different from the other symbiotic demons. I don't have the weakness of fire and ultrasound. After Toxin finished speaking, he took control of Eddie's body online. His hand stretched outwards, and the metal rod rope as thick as his wrist was easily torn apart. Not good. Luna frowned slightly. She pressed down with both hands, and the 4 metal bars that formed the cage immediately bent inwards, fiercely slamming into Eddie. I've already figured out your ability, human. Eddie growled in a low voice. His feet slammed downwards, and like a giant cannonball, he used his head to smash through the metal bars. Under the violent and powerful force, even the metal bars connected to the ground protruded out of the ground. He was like a beast that had been released from its cage. His entire body was filled with a violent aura. He picked up a piece of cracked ground from the road and used all his strength to smash it towards Luna. So what? Luna laughed instead. It was easy to figure out her ability, but to find a way to deal with it was another story. He saw her spread her hands outwards, and the cement ground that was flying at high speed came to an abrupt stop. It was incomparably strange as it stagnated in midair. Luna's delicate hand waved, and a green light glowed, and the piece of ground flew back in the opposite direction. Poison controlled Eddie to throw a punch, smashing the rock into pieces. He looked at Luna in disbelief. How can this be? Not only can you control metal, you can even control stone. Don't you know? The cement roads in the big cities are made of reinforced concrete. Eddie helplessly reminded. Correct, but there's no reward. Luna raised her hands, and her beautiful eyes flashed with a green light. The road shook violently as if there was an earthquake. At the same time, many cracks appeared on the surface, and soon the steel bars below were densely packed and suspended. This is big trouble, this is her home ground. Eddie bitterly said, looking at the metal objects that blocked the road, and the night view of the tall modern buildings in the surrounding big cities. Modern cities, the thing that they didn't lack the least was metal, especially the popular iron metal. This was the so-called Steel City. Poison fell into silence, and deeply agreed. I've crossed the Milky Way, and been to many places in the universe, but this is the first time I've seen such an incomprehensible ability. A small planet like Earth actually has this kind of ability. It's too abnormal, too monstrous. Those alien races that call themselves the light of science and technology will go crazy if they encounter it. Poison was not stingy with his praise, even though his appearance looked more like a monster in the eyes of outsiders. Magnetic field control. Any metal objects couldn't hurt ability users, and in the blink of an eye, she could tyrannically plunder metal equipment and use it for her own use. This was clearly the nemesis of science and technology. After all, most of science and technology was built on metal manufacturing. Poison, what should we do now? Eddie sighed and asked. What else can we do? At least don't lose so badly. Poison returned the body's initiative back to Eddie. Can't win, really can't win. The opponent's ability was too much of a bully. Eddie braced himself and continued to charge forward. After resisting stubbornly for 5 minutes, he ran out of energy and withdrew from the full coverage state. His limbs were bound by thick iron chains made of various kinds of metal, and he was locked to the building next to the road. 10 meters away. The green mist on Luna's hands dissipated, and her eyes showed exhaustion. Her face was pale from exhaustion, and her short dark green hair and white shirt were wet with sweat. Under the silver moonlight, it added a bit of sexy charm. In this battle, although she relied on her powerful ability to suppress and win, it was far from as easy as it looked. To subdue Eddie, who was in the full coverage state of poison, even the magnetic field control was very difficult. She had to maintain a highly tense state of mind until now, even her mental strength was almost exhausted. But at least I didn't embarrass the boss. Luna heaved a sigh of relief, dialed the communication device, and wanted to send her location to the headquarters of the law firm, and let K2 come to clean up. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Just then, a cold night wind blew. Luna looked to the side vigilantly and found that it was a blonde loli. She didn't know when she had been standing alone under the shade of a tree by the roadside. Her black pupils were coldly staring at her and the unconscious Eddie. Noticing Luna looking at her, the blonde little girl cracked a stiff and terrifying smile. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.